We have a special video up over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program, and it's about how a letter that the IRS sent out to 3.9 million Americans saved 700 lives. And you're like, wait a minute, the IRS saved 700 lives? How did that happen? Well, it had to do with Obamacare, and it's a fascinating story. And it turns out that this analysis of this IRS mailing was actually the first time that the federal government has done a study that actually proved that people having access to health care produces fewer deaths. For every 1,648 people who got the letter, there was one fewer premature death. I'll explain the whole thing in the video. It's you know, as I said, it's available over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and it is really worth checking out. And it's a great ad, essentially, for our national health care system. Book on the Thom Hartmann Book Report today, or Book Club today, is Cuban Women Confront the Future. It's an interview with Vilma Espin. Vilma Espin was the president of the Federation of Cuban Women since its founding in 1960, and was the chair of the Commission for Social Prevention and president of the Infancy Institute and the International Federation of Democratic Women. And it's a long-form interview, actually, the book. So the first question, what does socialism mean in the lives of a Cuban family, and in particular, Cuban woman? Vilma Espin. For the Cuban family, especially the woman, socialism has meant an enormous improvement to the quality of life and personal development. We should remember that until January 1st, 1959, in our country, hunger, poverty, exploitation, repression, and dependence reigned. The revolution opened up new horizons in the economic, political, and social fields, and amongst its key principles is the defense of equal rights for all human beings. The constant struggle to make ends meet disappeared, and with it the antagonism between people competing for the crumbs that could help them escape the tragic destiny that awaited the majority. Thus the family, the basic cell of society, could develop in a rounded way. Our revolution assured all Cubans the chance to exercise each one of their inalienable rights. Each citizen is assured that food prices are reasonable and that education and medical services are free. The state makes a systemic effort to improve living standards to the extent that it is permitted by the tense battle for development that we wage under blockade and constant imperialist threats. Child care facilities have been created to provide care for the children of tens of thousands of working women from the age of 3 months to 6 years. Services to lighten domestic work have been created. Hundreds of thousands of students have also received free lunch at day school and all their meals at boarding school. Hundreds of thousands of workers also receive their meals at a moderate price in their workplace. More industrial laundries and dry cleaners have been established, and more domestic labor-saving devices are available with preference in acquisition and cheaper prices for workers. Huge resources are dedicated to housing construction in urban and rural zones. We also try to guarantee recreational facilities and spiritual enjoyment to all the population. Of course, the possibilities are exciting, but also what we have achieved to date, considering our limitations, is already vastly superior to what families experienced in the past. Social Security provides an income for those who cannot work. As far as women are concerned, equal rights have certainly changed their position in the family and in society. A woman's participation in social production, because it implies her financial independence, has altered her dependent position in the marriage and allowed a change in her ideas, in the way she looks at life. The laws that govern family relations, such as the Family Code, are based on equality and guarantee the right of members of the family to participate in society, to work, study, and to responsibly educate the children in line with our revolutionary principles. This does not mean that we achieved all that we aspire to. We still have problems of a material nature to resolve, which are directly related to our economic development. There is still the need to eliminate backward ideas that some people hold, men and women, with respect to the role that each person should play within the home, the nature of the socialist family, and the relationship between a couple, ideas which work against the full participation of women in the building of a new society. Obviously, the economic security guaranteed by both men and women having access to work, free health care, and education, the obvious satisfaction and confidence in oneself that equal opportunity and the chance to fully develop to the extent of one's talents, intelligence, and aptitude offer to each person, the constant motivation and emotional stability that comes from feeling useful, recognized, and dignified as a human being, Everything that socialism has brought to us undoubtedly fulfills the deepest desires of a family, particularly the woman, who until just a quarter century ago was exploited, oppressed, and marginalized in the family and in society. Question: what is the primary concern in Cuba, work or the human being? What place do women occupy within this concern? Velma Espen: in Cuba, a country that is building socialism, the highest aim is human happiness, based on respect for the fundamental human rights of each person. That includes full social equality to education, healthcare, work, and professional training, with the chance to employ all of one's faculties to take an active role in society and to help develop that society, to create the material and spiritual basis for a full, harmonious life, where the highest qualities of both men and women flourish. To reach those aspirations requires work, talent, dedication, and willingness from everybody. It requires constant scientific and technological innovation to assure economic and social development. Thus, each member of our society, along with the right to work and all the benefits brought by the revolution, has acquired the duty to help create the economic basis necessary for such advantages. The building of a new society and the fulfillment of new aspirations could not possibly be achieved except on the basis of work and the willingness of the whole population. And the people work with enthusiasm because work is the means for creating wealth and goods for all to enjoy. Work that is free from exploitation does require a new dimension, a quality that stimulates and produces satisfaction. To feel that you are useful and are creating your destiny, to project yourselves toward the future through your work, to cultivate the future. In a speech in January 1964, Che Guevara said that when each Cuban viewed work as a vital expression of their human creativity, technology, technique, and inventions would proceed apace, and all would participate with an uncontainable force in building the new society. The book, Cuban Women Confront the Future, by Velma Espen.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And happy Wednesday. It's Wednesday. It's the first hour of the program, so it must be time for Middays with Mark, Congressman Mark Pocan, who will be taking your calls for the entire hour at 202-808-9925. So whatever topic you want to talk about with Congressman Pocan, feel free to give us a shout and get in line. Congressman Pocan is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. His website is Pocan, POCAN.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep, as in representative, Rep Mark Pocan. Mark is spelled M-A-R-K. Congressman, welcome back.
Hey, Tom. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. Louise and I watched the debate last night. Only went through 2 gin and tonics. It wasn't too terrible.
Uh-oh.
We've had 3 drink debates before. This was my sense was that the moderators did a pretty terrible job. I was horrified when Buttigieg kept talking over Bernie. I mean, that seems so small and petty. That has to have hurt him. I don't know. We haven't seen the polls yet, but what are your thoughts about winners, losers, takeaways, messages, things that we should be thinking about with regard to last night's debate?
Yeah, I share your feelings about last night. In fact, I tweeted that last night. I thought the moderators let it go out of control. They didn't stop people from talking over each other, didn't follow time limits. The subjects were all over the place. This morning, my colleague from Florida, Lois Frankel, said, why don't you just throw some red meat out there for him? That's kind of how the debate format was, and I think because of that, I don't know if we got a whole lot out of last night's debate other than I think Bernie Sanders kept his front-runner status despite some, attacks on him, and I still looking at Michael Bloomberg and thinking with that much money, you think you could buy a little more debate prep, and I just didn't see it happen.
Yeah. And what I'd like to see him do is try to become the Rupert Murdoch. I mean, buy some media, buy some radio stations and put progressive programming on them. There are things you can do with that money, and with just a relatively small amount. I mean, iHeartRadio is for sale for $1.1 billion just 6 months ago, and boy, would that would have been such an investment. After Mitt Romney bought it and basically stripped the company. But anyway, I understand that you were in a briefing by the administration this morning about the coronavirus possible pandemic and possibly coming to the United States. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so actually it was my Labor, Human Services, Education Subcommittee for the Appropriations. We had Secretary Azar there. And I got to tell you, I'm not incredibly impressed with the White House response to this. People are all over the board, from people like Larry Kudlow saying it's contained, and Secretary Wilbur Ross saying this is good for U.S. business, to people saying, this Homeland Secretary yesterday said in several months that have a vaccine, but we're being told by CDC and others it's going to be 18 months. People are all over the board, and the fact that they don't seem to have a central place for this messaging makes me a little concerned on what their efforts exactly are. They're more worried about the stock market than they are, I think, the virus. And I actually asked the Secretary outright, would he be willing to transfer some of the money they stole for the wall and put that towards this? And he said, no, they wouldn't be able to do that. And, the wall's not going to stop the coronavirus, much less, I think, migration. We're hoping that the press conference tonight will be something that provides some clarity, but right now I don't see clarity coming out of the administration.
Was there any discussion about how in 2018 the Trump administration kicked out Rear Admiral Tim Zeimer? He was the senior director for global health security on the National Security Council. They went on to quote, and this is from the New York Times, eliminate the position and the NSC's entire global health security unit, end quote. And then they forced out Tom Bossert, a highly regarded expert who is Zimmer's counterpart at DHS, at the Department of Homeland Security, so that, again, quote, this is quoting from Foreign Policy magazine, quote, neither the National Security Council nor the Department of, DHS, Department of Homeland Security epidemic teams have been replaced. There's literally nobody in the Trump administration who has any experience with epidemic diseases. They have shut down the two major agencies, or whatever you call them, committees within the NSC and the Department of Homeland Security, and replaced their people. He slashed funding for the CDC's epidemic activities. He tried to decimate funding for the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps. You guys stopped that in the House and the Senate, but instead now he's not replaced any of the members who have quit or resigned or retired. And as a result, that public health service is operating at 2/3, of its staff. And the CDC, which you'd think is in charge of this, is not in charge of this. In fact, they recommended that those Americans with the Wuhan virus who were brought back to the United States not be brought back. The CDC recommended that, but they were overruled by Mike Pompeo in the State Department, who has, to the best of my knowledge, no experience whatsoever with epidemic diseases. I mean, was that part of the discussion?
Yeah, actually, I brought up about Rear Admiral Timothy Zeimer. I brought up about the CDC cutting 80% of their global health security initiative. So now they're in about a fifth of the countries they were in at one point trying to deal with global health. Brought up the fact that the FDA has said there could be 150 prescription drugs at risk or shortage if the outbreak worsens, and yet the FDA commissioner isn't part of the task force that's planning the U.S. response. We brought up all of these inconsistencies, and that's the problem, whether it be a variety of messages coming from different cabinet secretaries to this, what you've just laid out and I laid out this morning. There is not a coordinated effort at the White House. And so it was leaked this morning from Politico that they're going to appoint Azar, and Secretary Azar said, no, that's not true. He doesn't believe that. Well, if it turns out tonight that happens and the Secretary supposed to be in charge of this right now didn't even know, I mean, this is a cluster of the greatest proportion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Was the hearing bipartisan? Did you have Republican colleagues in the room with you? And if so, how did they react?
Yeah, they generally praised the White House response to dealing with the coronavirus, but greatly criticized where they try to steal the funding. Like stealing funding from Ebola would be a serious error. And that was a bipartisan response, with the exception of, I think, one Republican. People brought that up. I recently talked to someone fairly high up in the administration, I think in the last year, and they mentioned one of the top two things they're working on is Ebola. That's one of their concerns. So stealing money from that to fund this instead of the wall doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we had a lot of conversations about that.
Fascinating stuff. Well, let's get to our callers here. Again, Congressman Mark Pocan, he is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the state of Wisconsin and is taking your calls for the hour. Todd in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Todd, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman Pocan. Hey, Tom.
Hey.
My question is I keep hearing this thing going around that, electability, the idea of electability. I'm more electable. Is it really that big of a deal if everybody just votes blue?
No, you're right.
Question.
I mean, I think for many of us, Todd, that's our biggest message is that whoever gets the nomination is going to be better than Donald Trump. However, in a primary season, if you can pick the person who is best equipped to not only lead on the right values, people like I would argue, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, other progressives, or also have the ability to beat Donald Trump, I think that's real important. In fact, this morning I saw Nancy Pelosi made a comment, and I was really happy to see that she would be comfortable with Sanders on top of the ticket because there were a couple Democrats who said they were concerned about that. Bottom line is we're going to support, I think, someone who's going to defeat Donald Trump. I think right now that person is looking like it could be Bernie Sanders. And I think that will help bring out young voters and independents as well as the Democratic base, and that's the way to win elections.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see a base election. The Democratic Party has not run one basically since 1964.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see
I think it will bring out a lot of voters, and that's the test we really, I think.
There you go. I'm with you. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's your media support group for We the People. Talk media for the sane left among us. I think our numbers are growing, actually. Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. Paul in Ashland, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey.
Thank you for taking my call.
Hey, Paul.
I am calling to ask Congressman Pocan if he thinks that the chief executive should be subject to indictment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice so that this Justice Department memo that prevents indictment of an outlaw president can be essentially disregarded because we're currently under attack by enemies, foreign and domestic. And since the chief executive has attacked our military and our intelligence services, I would think that the UCMJ would be the most direct way to remove an outlaw.
Because he's the commander-in-chief of the military. That's fascinating. Congressman, have you ever heard that the commander-in-chief, the president, is subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice? I've never heard that idea, but it's a fascinating one.
Yeah, no, I have not heard that, Paul. I can tell you, though, if any of that would require the Senate, I think we've seen where the Senate's going to fall. They're going to decide that they're going to stick with their party over their country. And so, unfortunately, we don't have a partner in the Senate at many of these efforts. I think we do have 6 committees that are doing oversight over the president. They're going to continue to do their work. But it's an interesting proposition, Paul, and I'd have to take a closer look at it.
Barbara in Chicago Heights, Illinois, watching us on YouTube. Barbara, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Congressman Pocan.
Hi.
My question is about Tom broke the possibility that Trump could try to steal the election by having states validated, the vice president having the constitutional right to declare or nullify, Tom could explain it better than I can, the results of the election, and then the House of Representatives would end up voting for the president, and since there are only 50 states and the House of Representatives, Republicans have more states than they are Democratic states, the election can be stolen.
Yeah, I laid this out a couple days ago, and Barbara did a really good job of recapping it. That basically an election has to be certified by the vice president, by the president of the Senate, and we saw this in the election of 1876. And although the vice president then had just recently died, so it was a different senator was the president, but he refused to certify the election, and this was Tilden Hayes. And so it should have gone to the states under the Constitution, but the Republicans and Democrats worked out a compromise and came up with a 15-person commission who cut the deal that ended Reconstruction and put Hayes into office. But under the Constitution, if the vice president, if Mike Pence were to say, I'm not going to certify this election because it looks like there was fraud in Wisconsin or in Ohio or whatever, then it does go to the House of Representatives, and each state has one vote. And I believe there's 32 Republican-controlled states. I guess we'll have to talk about it on the other side of the break. Barbara, thank you for that. I'm sorry I wasn't watching the clock. But Congressman, I'd love to get your thoughts on that. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. It's 19 and a half minutes past the hour right now. Here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars, the place where despair is not an option. Stick around. We'll be right back. Congressman Mark Pocan, it's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. 20 minutes past the hour. Carol was just calling Congressman Pocan and pointing out in Florida in the 2000 election, the Republican-controlled Florida legislature passed legislation which never got enacted because the Supreme Court intervened that would have required all of Florida's electoral votes to go for George W. Bush, regardless of the outcome of the vote. States have that legal authority. And if the vice president refuses to certify the election, as Pramila Jayapal begged Joe Biden to do in the 2016 election, I believe it was. If the vice president refuses to certify the election, then the vote goes to the House of Representatives, and each state gets one vote. There's 50. I believe 32 of the states are Republican-controlled. That would put Trump in office regardless of the popular vote, regardless of the Electoral College vote. Congressman, are you hearing anything about this? I have actually heard this scenario or variations on this scenario from 2 different Republican consultants in the last 2 months.
Yeah, Tom, I think to me it falls into there's probable and possible, right? I think with Donald Trump, anything is possible, unfortunately, because we've seen it from him. But probable, it would be, I still think, somewhat difficult given that I don't think the American people would stand for something like that, and I think would have some ability to fight back. But any scenario with this president, as we know, when he asks foreign leaders for help, everything else that's never been done before, I wouldn't put past him, but I do think he would face a lot of resistance.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Maher and I have been asking the question, what if he loses and refuses to leave office? I think I'm increasingly thinking, particularly after talking to these conservative consultants, political consultants, that Congress can give him the vote, or individual states. I mean, if you've got a state that has, it's up to the legislature of the states in the Constitution, not the governor. So Wisconsin, your legislature is controlled by the Republicans. If they vote to give Wisconsin's electoral votes, all of their electoral votes, to Trump, regardless of the outcome of the vote in Wisconsin, they have the legal authority to do that. It's right there in the Constitution. And as I said, it's been done before, and they almost did it in Florida in 2000. They actually passed that vote. So there's some, I have some concern. But anyhow, we'll hope for the best. Edward in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Congressman Pocan and Tom.
Hey, Edward.
Wonderful to talk to both of you. My question, let me take you off the speaker real quick.
Yeah, let me take Edward off the line here. Dennis in Crystal Lake, if somebody says speaker, I put them on hold. Dennis in Crystal River, Florida, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, I have one question. To make the voting legal, why don't we go back to paper ballots?
Great question, Congressman.
Yeah. Dennis, I'll tell you that part of H.R. 1 addresses some of this. I've been a long advocate to make sure that you have a paper ballot no matter what, including the touchscreen ballot systems that we have should still have a receipt so you can have a verifiable count. And that is some of the language that we have in H.R. 1. That is my language that was put into the bill that we passed out of the House that Mitch McConnell has not taken up and will not take up in the Senate. So you're right. That would be a simple, common-sense way to make sure that we don't have some future problems with someone trying to hack into a system.
Jim, is it Kapa'ua, Hawaii? I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that.
Close, Tom. Kapa'au.
There you go. Okay, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, hey, thanks for what you guys do. Mr. Pocan, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of yours. Thanks to Tom. But I have a concern and a question that with the apparent inevitability of the arrival of the coronavirus maybe getting to the U.S. and spreading, and I see this playing right into the hands of Trump with the respect of declaring a state of emergency, maybe right around the election time. What can you do as a legislator to ensure that he doesn't use that state of emergency or that to even create more chaos and make more of a problem around the election time? This is very concerning to me, that his ability to do that, and then just the fact that they're totally unprepared for the coming of this virus.
And let me add, does the Patriot Act, in fact, give him the ability during a time of emergency to suspend elections? My understanding is it does, but I've heard conflicting answers.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to find out on that last one, Tom. I can tell you that right now they were supposed to have a markup this afternoon in the judiciary on the FISA provisions of the Patriot Act reauthorization, and I think they may be pulling it. That's going to be reauthorized very soon, and we have some strong concerns. We'd like to make it much better than it is right now. To Jim's points, on the first one, Jim, I mean, it's a hypothetical, and it's really hard to answer hypotheticals not knowing what could happen. But let me say this. While you have the White House surrogate, Rush Limbaugh, saying the coronavirus is nothing more than the common cold, real professionals like Dr. Fauci, who we all respect, said it's inevitable it's going to come to the United States. The CDC has said it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, which is why we hope there is a more coordinated response than we've seen out of the White House. Right now, they're more worried about the stock market, I think, than they are dealing with this as a health crisis. And I would add on top of all this, Tom, we could have a great conversation sometime about the amount of prescription drugs and essential ingredients for prescription drugs that are produced in China, that should this situation grow, we could have a shortage here. And that's something that FDA has even pointed out, 150 drugs that they're worried about potentially having this happen. I just read a book called China RX that lays this out. So my concern, Jim, right now is let's make sure that we are getting a smarter, better, medically based approach towards dealing with this in the United States. We need more coordination, so I hope they do something to make it more coordinated than what it currently is. And we need to deal with it as a health crisis, not as economic crisis, and worry about the stock market over the health aspects of this, because right now I think that's what Donald Trump is thinking about.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. And with regard to the drugs, I contacted my physician. I take a blood pressure medication. Louise takes a thyroid medication. We contacted our doc, and he said, yes, this is a problem. Both these medications are made in China. And so he gave us prescriptions for 90-day supply and wrote for vacation travel on it, yeah, which causes the health insurance companies to actually pay for it. And to pay for a 90-day supply, typically you can't get a 90-day supply. And I think probably people all around the country should be doing that. Get ready. This supply chain could be interrupted, and I don't think that's hysteria, Congressman.
No, this is real. And China RX lays it out well.
To the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Yeah, this is real. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program every Wednesday, first hour, right here. Okay, the magic phone number is 877-378-8669 if you want to support this program and you want to support Free Speech TV. Any donations given after the first 10 minutes of our show are attributed to this program, and so we really appreciate it if you would call 877-378-8669 and make your gift. The Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker is a $20 premium with a $20 contribution. $20, it's like that's at least here in Portland. That's the cost of an inexpensive meal in a restaurant. Going out one night, $20. If you please help Free Speech TV. They need this network needs your help. This network runs on your contribution. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With the $20 gift, you can also get a car magnet to get the vote out. And the car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" Yesterday, I read the wrong side of the screen. I was like, what? A car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" And it's great. I mean, this is something we need to get out there, right? With a $50 contribution, you get the Just Effing Vote canvas tote bag. And it's a nice, good, solid canvas tote bag. With a $75 gift, you get a coffee mug. The Thom Hartmann Tag Your It coffee mug, which is kind of cool. I need to get one of those myself so I can wave it in front of the TV screen here. With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, with a $240 gift, hang out. You'll get an invitation. We work out the time so it works for people. We tend to try to do it in relatively small groups, 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the most. And, we get together on Zoom or on Skype or whatever, the engineers work out, and have an off-the-record, not recorded, just us conversation. And some of them have been absolutely fascinating, where you can ask anything you want, and I'll tell you my unvarnished thoughts, which I generally do here on TV, but sometimes we can drill a little deeper and have more in-depth conversation, especially one-on-one. So that's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get the Get Out the Vote pack. That's a set of Free Speech TV host postcards to send to friends and family to encourage them to watch our programs and know about Free Speech TV. You get a car magnet to get out the vote. It says, "I'm voting, are you?" You get the Just Effing Vote tote bag, and you get my new book, The Hidden History of the Republican War on Voting. The word Republican is not in the title. I begged my publisher to put it in there, and they were like, "Well, that would seem too partisan." But it's true. So anyhow, that you get the book. With a $360 gift, which could be $30 a month for a year, you get the entire collection of my hidden history books so far. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. That's with a $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and hang out in our studio here for the last hour of the show. You can see how Sean and Nate and Lise and Joyce make all this magic here, and you won't see Nigel and Sue, who are doing the back end stuff on the web and putting together our newsletter with our our free newsletter. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Every single day, it's got a link to every single story that I've referenced, and it only goes to people who sign up for it. We don't sell the list; it's just ours. But Sue puts that together, and it's great stuff. You won't see Dave, our engineer. There's a bunch of great people working on the program. But our frontline folks are all here every day right here in the studio, and they're looking forward to meeting you. And then I'm looking forward to taking you out to lunch. And, we'll have a nice lunch and a nice conversation. There's a couple restaurants just right around the corner here. So that's with a $1,000 gift. Come to Portland for the meet and greet. And, those are our premiums. The bottom line, though, is this is a critical time for America. We are at a crossroads. We have a man in the White House who may well, we need to even stop talking about this in the future, who has already turned our government into an instrument of autocracy. We now have our Justice Department investigating people that Donald Trump views as his enemies, his perceived enemies. The Justice Department actually investigated Hillary Clinton to see if there was any possible reason to put her in jail. This actually happened. They actually investigated the former FBI director, James Comey, and his assistant, Andrew McCabe, to see if there was anything that they did when they were looking into Russian interference in the election that might have been wrong, that they could use to put James Comey and Andrew McCabe in jail. They actually did. They couldn't find anything in either case, but they actually did these investigations. They are purging the Justice Department of lawyers who are impartial and replacing them with Trump toadies This has happened in the Justice Department, in the Environmental Protection Agency. They moved all the scientists out to St. Louis, Missouri, which stripped them of half their scientists, and they are essentially persecuting the scientists who believe in climate change and hiring scientists who don't believe in climate change and who think pollution is just fine, thank you very much. In the Interior Department, same deal. They've gotten rid of many of the scientists, and they're now selling off our public lands, including some sacred Native American sites. It's insane. We need to talk about it. 877-378-8669. Call now. Coming up in the Science Revolution this week, I explain why biodiversity matters and what happens when we lose biodiversity. Margaret Butler from the Extinction Rebellion is here about the activists fighting against oil trains and what happened to them. Dr. David Reichmuth also joins me on the impact of electric cars and find out why people are adding mushrooms to their coffee. That's the Science Revolution, wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. It's 34 minutes past the hour, middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan is on the line. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. Pocan.house.gov is his website, P-O-C-A-N, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. And Edward in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi. Good morning, gentlemen. My question is about the coronavirus. With the dismantling of everything that Obama put into place to take care of this by the Trump administration, are there any, setbacks? Are there any second chances that we've got to stop this from coming in and attacking the general population in the country?
Yeah, Edward, thanks for the question. In fact, I was recently in Cedar Rapids during your caucus, and it was glad to be there. Nice city. Yes, while there have been the things that Tom and I mentioned at the beginning of the program, all these rollbacks from the Obama administration where we had more preparedness for dealing with this, this is going to come. And the CDC has said it. Dr. Fauci has said it. I've been in closed-door briefings with only medical folks nationally around this. It's different than what we're hearing from the president and Larry Kudlow and others who are trying to have this not affect the stock market. But the reality is this is something that is growing. Back when we had our closed-door briefing, they had 2 days of it leveling off, and they thought that could be a good sign, and the very next day 16,000 new cases were announced. So we have to have a coordinated global response. We have to work closer and get more information from China, but we have to take this seriously as a medical issue in the United States and not as something that affects the economy. And I don't know if Donald Trump is capable yet of that. Tonight we'll see. He's got a press conference. Let's hope he does the right thing. This should be bigger than him or any of us. But I think we can still, as a great nation, stand up to this. But I do have concerns that we're not focused on the right aspects of this right now.
One of the things that psychological studies tell us is that when people are fearful, they tend to vote more conservatively. Does that concern you?
Yeah, although if it turns out that his response to this has been bad, people might realize that that's why you actually need adults in the White House, right? And
yeah, that's a good one.
In the White House.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be the other approach. But I am concerned. I mean, when you've got the Secretary of Homeland Security yesterday saying we'll have a virus, a cure in several months, and we're being told by every health professional it's probably a year to more likely 18 months, that shows that they're not all on the same page. That does provide me great concern.
Yeah. Russell in Hickory Hills, Illinois, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, yes. Nice to talk to you, Mr. Pocan. Tom, I was wondering, I'd watched Joey Reid Sunday, and they had, we're winning Michigan, Pennsylvania. Your state comes up. Donald Trump's beaten most of all our top candidates. Why is that in Wisconsin? Or is what I fear? They're going red in Wisconsin, we're going blue in Arizona. Why are we behind to Donald Trump after almost 4 years? Do you have an answer?
Yeah, Russell, that was an outlier poll. Thanks for asking. There was one poll that came out that showed that And they, again, used the sampling from our 2016 turnout where we had a 250,000 Democratic voter drop-off. I doubt that will happen again. And I think we'll have a nominee that'll come to our state and a lot of other things that'll work, including the convention being in Wisconsin, help that out. So every other poll has shown Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders generally beating, sometimes more of the candidates beating Donald Trump in Wisconsin. And that was a single outlier, and not too much, I think, should be put into that. This week we'll have another poll. In fact, I believe it might be today from the Marquette poll, which often samples a little more towards 2016 as well. That'll probably be, I think, more representative. But all the other polls that have been in Wisconsin have shown several Democrats defeating Donald Trump in our state, albeit very close. We are a purple state.
Nele in Madison, Wisconsin. Speaking of Wisconsin, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan, who may well be your congressman. I'm not sure.
As I want to say, yes, he does represent me well in Congress, and I'm very proud to have you there. I have one question. What if Trump refuses the election goes through, he's declared the loser, what if he refuses to leave office? What's the steps on that then? What do they take?
Yeah, and we mentioned this a little earlier, Neil, a little bit about this. Again, I think there's a lot of scenarios that people are putting out there that, again, it's the possible versus the probable. And I think at this point, the best thing we can all do is focus on the elections before us, because that is the single best way to see the change that I think many of us and many of Tom's listeners are looking for. And trust me, there are many people talking about many different scenarios and making sure that we're ready. But I think talking about those to every hypothetical situation doesn't serve us as well as really focusing on what we need to do right now, which is in every state, make sure that we're building the strongest operation possible to get out voters to try to change the election results and have Democrats win in these states where some people often stayed home. We need to get them out voting their values. If we do that, I think we're going to be successful in November.
Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour, Middays with Mark. Chris in Spooner, Wisconsin, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Say, I just like the congressman to speak to electability and why they attack Sanders so much, when I think that electability, as far as that, Buttigieg being nothing's going to mobilize the Christian right like a homosexual running for president, and I think that makes him unelectable because it'll draw away and it'll activate the base of the Christian right, which I think is wrong,
Congressman?
Yeah. Chris, so I think, the way I look at it is the majority of people agree with progressives on issues, whether it be the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage of $15, go down the list of progressive values. And those are all 60 to 80% issues. I think when people don't vote, often it's because they don't feel like a candidate really believes it, that their vote is wasted. And that's what we saw the Russians trying to do when they interfered in our elections in 2016, is try to convince people their vote is wasted. If we have a nominee who talks to those values strongly, I think that person wins. And in Wisconsin, Chris, we had a 250,000 Dem voter drop-off because people weren't inspired enough to get out to vote. We have to really prove that we believe these things and we'll get people out to vote, and that's how you win elections. So, personally, as a progressive, I believe Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren most closely mirror those values. I've endorsed Bernie Sanders because I saw what he did in Wisconsin in 2016 when he won 71 out of 72 counties and got 72% of the vote of independents, 73% of young voters, two key constituencies. But we just got to really talk to the issues that people talk about at their kitchen table. They're concerned about not having health care, that they can afford their mortgage or rent. We need to talk about those sorts of issues, and if we do that, I think we're going to be victorious.
Jim in Denver, Colorado, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I think we talked about this, not you and I, but Article 14. When representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their numbers, and if they're not allowed to vote, as of gerrymandering and voter suppression, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in proportion to which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens. And, could we use that to get some of the representatives kicked out in these red states that do the voter suppression?
Yeah, no, Brian Kemp kicked 580,000 people off the voting rolls. Greg Palast and the BBC proved that at least 340,000 of them were still Georgia residents, still living at the same place. According to the 14th Amendment, Georgia should have lost a member of the House of Representatives as a consequence of that. Has anybody ever seriously taken that up?
I haven't seen the proposal introduced to take that up. I can tell you, though, that there are many efforts looking at redistricting right now, led by groups including Eric Holder's organization that Barack Obama is involved with, trying to make sure we're addressing this so we don't have this. But I can tell you, in Wisconsin, we just had there's a court case right now pending over a couple 100,000 votes that could be purged. Some of those people voted in 2016, and they're trying to purge them off the records, and that is currently in litigation. So any of these efforts that we see come from Republicans to try to pick voters rather than voters picking their elected officials are problematic, and we have to fight them everywhere, and we are fighting them everywhere, and thankfully there are organizations doing just that.
Lydia in Port Angeles, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, good morning. I'm proud to say that I voted for Bernie Sanders already. In Washington State, we have a mail-in ballot. It's so easy and don't even need a stamp. It's so great, and I'm telling everybody that will listen to me that I think I recommend him. Anyway, so thanks for being there with him. A couple ideas. One is that maybe Ivanka Trump's business in China with her purses or clothing or whatever it is will be affected by this virus, and that'll hit her in the pocket, and maybe she'll say to her father to do something serious about it. Just one idea. But other than that, I wanted to call about these chemtrails. I'm looking out my window, and it's next to the spread of viruses. I think it's not very well known, but they are spraying these nanoparticulates into our atmosphere. They look like a contrail on an airplane, but they don't go away. They kind of slowly disperse and spread, and they're involved in this kind of people don't know, it's top secret, and this it may be conspiracy, but it's geoengineering. And there's a website you can find out very good information from a guy named Dane Wiggins.
We've got it, Lydia. Congressman, do you want to debunk that, or shall I?
I was going to address the first question on China, which I think, one of my concerns was when the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross talked about this, that it could be good for U.S. business because it's going to hurt China. That's a bizarre response to have to something like the coronavirus that obviously borders aren't going to stop, and we have to have a worldwide response to. So I am very concerned, again, that their concerns are more about markets than health. And let's hope that the president is stepping up to something better tonight when he addresses it.
All right. And with regard to the vapor trails that come out of the back end of jet airplanes, when you burn fossil fuels, one of the byproducts is carbon dioxide. The other major byproduct is water, hydrogen and oxygen. And that water comes out of these engines. They're at 30, 40,000 feet where the air is 70 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. And it immediately freezes. What you're looking at are ice crystals, those contrails. They slowly disperse in some places, and they more rapidly disperse in other places, depending on the temperature of the air around them. And it's just very simple math and chemistry. There are not additives being put into jet fuel, and there are not machines on jet airplanes that are pumping chemicals into the air that are harming us. That is an absolute, total wrong, bizarre, theory that comes out of the fever swamps of the Alex Jones hard right, and to try to make you not trust your government and not trust basically anybody. So it may even be propaganda from another country. So Carol, get a grip. This is not happening. Congressman Pocan, thank you for your response on China, too. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the House.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And he's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, pocan.house.gov on the web, and on Twitter, it's Rep. Mark Pocan. And welcome back. Jim, listening on KPFK out of L.A. You're in Atwater, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. Congressman, could you introduce a bill basically steal my votes and go to jail. Vote counters and poll workers must be warned. Election fraud will put you in jail. 2 poll workers in Pennsylvania went to jail for stealing votes, one for 14 years. They must be warned.
Yeah, Jim, I think you just did it. People can't do efforts that block your ability to vote. The only thing I will say, and we haven't talked about this in a long time, Tom, is there is a constitutional amendment that I had introduced previously to give us a constitutional right to vote, because there's not an explicit right to vote. It is certainly implied in the Constitution. We talk about discrimination in voting in the Constitution, but we do not have an explicit right to vote, and I think someday that would be an important issue for people to be taking up.
Yeah, the way I explain that is, if Florida or Michigan or name your state wants to take away your gun, they have to go to court. They have to jump through all kinds of hoops. They have to prove that you're crazy or dangerous to yourself or others. There's all these things that states have to do in order to take away a person's gun. But if a state wants to take away your vote, they don't even have to tell you. They can just do it and organize.
If you had a constitutional right, they would have to. The burden is on them, not on you to prove that they violated your right. And that
exactly
changes the dynamic.
Exactly right. Michael in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Congressman, thank you for your work. Tom, always thank you for your work. It's self-evident that this needs to be the absolute largest turnout in Democratic voters of my lifetime, certainly, and there are some amazing progressives running, and that folks need to get behind whoever the Democratic nominee is. But y'all have been talking about, and people have been asking about martial law because of coronavirus, or what Trump may or may not do when he loses and saying we'll have to see what happens. But I don't think that without there being some preparedness on someone's part, that if this scenario plays out, that there needs to be some places that people can go. And do you have anything, Tom or Congressman, that you can illuminate the listeners to of where we might go if things go south? And thank you both again.
Yeah, Michael, I think, first of all, you might be a little early on that, right? I mean, we know it's going to come here, but we also know, and we're learning from watching other countries' responses, some good, some not as strong, and what we may need to do here. So I don't think we're quite at that hypothetical situation yet. There's not like a place to go. But I do think there's some common sense things that, as you continue to see what other countries are doing and responding, that we should do. And I think just being personally vigilant and making sure we have the proper response nationally, which is what I'm going to try to do, is the best we can do at this point.
Okay, we have just 11 seconds here until the break. Thoughts on how that might play out?
Again, I'm hoping the president will do the right thing tonight. I'm not going to bank on that, but right now the response is pretty uncoordinated, in my opinion, from the federal government.
Yeah, in large part because he's fired or laid off most of the people who should be doing this work.
They should have dealt with this for years.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. It's 51 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. The place where despair is not an option. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a second. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, which I will be giving a talk about and signing here in Portland on Friday night, 7:30 at Powell's Bookstore, the main one down on Burnside, and on Sunday at noon in Chicago, or actually in Darien, Illinois, the suburb of Chicago, at Frugal Muse Books. In both cases, no admission, no pre-registration, just be there or be square. Protecting your vote is a very important thing, and we're going to be talking about that. Stan in Wanawak, Wisconsin, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, thank you, Tom, and I'm a very proud constituent of Representative Pocan. Wondered if he could make a comment on the hysteria concerning Bernie's potential candidacy and what it will do to the down-ticket races. We hear all these doomsday scenarios about losing the House and losing the Senate. And if I'm looking back to 2016 in the race in Wisconsin when Russ Feingold was running against a pretty vulnerable Johnson for a Senate seat, and he lost that seat. And I always wondered if he might not have done better if he'd had a better candidate at the top of the ticket. Would you like to respond?
Sure. I think the first thing I'd say is what Nancy Pelosi actually said this morning, which is she's comfortable with Sanders on the ticket. So if you've got the person who is literally responsible for keeping the House majority saying it's not a problem, I think people should listen to her and maybe chill out a bit because it's not a problem. Secondly, I would argue anyone who can increase the turnout of young voters and independents to vote along with the Democratic base expands the amount of the electorate that are voting Democratic is a good thing, and that's what people like Bernie Sanders do by talking about progressive values. So I think that gets taken care of. And just to your final point, when we had a 250,000 Dem voter drop-off in Wisconsin in 2016, that's what cost Russ Feingold being elected to the Senate. Every poll showed him up to Election Day. It's only because of the depressed turnout that we had that he lost that day, and we can't have that happen in Wisconsin or anywhere in the country.
Brian in Lake Worth, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman Pocan. It's a pleasure to speak with you. My question is, why isn't President Trump or any other president that finds himself in this situation considered to be illegitimate president because he was put in office with assistance from a foreign country? Thank you.
Yeah, Brian, I think we as a country have lived through the Mueller report, through all these other things that showed clearly, without question, the Russians interfered in our elections with the goal of electing Donald Trump. Right now, they're going to get involved again, and much of what they're doing is just trying to create discord so that people don't come out to vote. Ultimately, that does help Republicans when fewer people come out to vote. And I think many of us think people should be more concerned when you have a foreign influence coming in and trying to affect elections. But somehow Republicans have decided as long as he continues to provide tax cuts for the really, really rich people, they're going to keep funding the campaigns as long as he says he's against a woman's choice about her body, then certain other people are going to follow, and he has built a coalition of people who also support his racist views. And out of that, people are willing to look the other way. Unfortunately for him, I don't think it's going to be a majority of people, and that's why we have to be very vigilant and active for November.
Michael in Hammond, Indiana, we have 50 seconds left. If you can ask a question in 20 seconds, go for it.
Oh, absolutely. Can Bernie Sanders really get his programs through Congress?
Great question.
Yeah, great question, Michael. A part of it is about all of us building the same movement that he's using to get elected. We need to build across the country. So if you don't listen to your constituents that they want health care, you may not be in office anymore. So it's really going to be our grassroots movement that we are building right now that's going to get this done. There are plenty of special interests and well-connected folks in D.C., in the Beltway, that don't want to see these happen because they make a lot of money with the current system. We're fighting against that, but people power will always be stronger than that power if we all are active and work for these efforts. So I do believe that we can make these things real, but it's going to take the work of every single one of us.
There you go. Congressman Pocan, thanks so much for the great work you're doing in the U.S. House of Representatives, for the great work you're doing as the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and for coming on our show every single week for this Middays with Mark segment. We really appreciate it, and I know our listeners love the whole national town hall meeting that we have every week here. Thank you so much.
No, glad to do it, Tom. Thank you.
Congressman Mark Pocan, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Tell him hi for us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
We have a special video up over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, and it's about how a letter that the IRS sent out to 3.9 million Americans saved 700 lives. And you're like, wait a minute, the IRS saved 700 lives? How did that happen? Well, it had to do with Obamacare, and it's a fascinating story. And it turns out that this analysis of this IRS mailing was actually the first time that the federal government has done a study that actually proved that people having access to health care produces fewer deaths. For every 1,648 people who got the letter, there was one fewer premature death. I'll explain the whole thing in the video. It's you know, as I said, it's available over at ThomHartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and it is really worth checking out. And it's a great ad, essentially, for a national health care system. Okay, the magic phone number is 877-378-8669 if you want to support this program and you want to support Free Speech TV. Any donations given after the first 10 minutes of our show are attributed to this program, and so we really appreciate it if you would call 877-378-8669 and make your gift. The Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker is a $20 premium with a $20 contribution. You know, $20, it's like, that's, at least here in Portland, you know, that's the cost of an inexpensive meal in a restaurant, you know, going out one night. $20. If you please help Free Speech TV. They need this network needs your help. This network runs on your contribution. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With the $20 gift, you can also get a car magnet to get the vote out. And the car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" Yesterday, I read the wrong side of the screen. I was like, what? A car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" And it's great. I mean, this is something we need to get out there, right? With a $50 contribution, you get the Just Effing Vote canvas tote bag. And it's a nice, you know, good solid canvas tote bag. With a $75 gift, you get a coffee mug. The Thom Hartmann Tag Your It coffee mug, which is kind of cool. I need to get one of those myself so I can wave it in front of the TV screen here. With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, with a $240 gift, hang out. You know, you'll get an invitation. We work out the time so it works for people. We tend to try to do it in relatively small groups, 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the most. And, you know, we get together on Zoom or on Skype or whatever, you know, the engineers work out, and have an off-the-record, not recorded, just us conversation. And some of them have been absolutely fascinating, where you can ask anything you want, and I'll tell you my unvarnished thoughts, which I generally do here on TV, but sometimes we can drill a little deeper and have, you know, more in-depth conversation, especially one-on-one. So that's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get the Get Out the Vote pack. That's a set of Free Speech TV host postcards to send to friends and family to encourage them to watch our programs and know about Free Speech TV. You get a car magnet to get out the vote. It says, "I'm voting, are you?" You get the Just Effing Vote tote bag, and you get my new book, The Hidden History of the Republican War on Voting. The word Republican is not in the title. I begged my publisher to put it in there, and they were like, "Well, that would seem too partisan." But it's true. So anyhow, that you get the book. With a $360 gift, which could be $30 a month for a year, you get the entire collection of my hidden history books so far. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. That's with a $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and, you know, hang out in our studio here for the last hour of the show. You can see how Sean and Nate and Lise and Joyce, you know, make all this magic here, and you won't see Nigel and Sue, who are, you know, doing the back end stuff on the web and you know, putting together our newsletter with our our free newsletter. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Every single day, it's got a link to every single story that I've referenced, and it only goes to people who sign up for it. We don't sell the list; it's just ours. But Sue puts that together, and it's great stuff. You won't see Dave, our engineer. There's a bunch of great people working on the program, But our frontline folks are all here every day right here in the studio, and they're looking forward to meeting you. And then I'm looking forward to taking you out to lunch. And, we'll have a nice lunch and a nice conversation. There's a couple restaurants just right around the corner here. So that's with a $1,000 gift. Come to Portland for the meet and greet. And, those are our premiums. The bottom line, though, is this is a critical time for America. We are at a crossroads. We have a man in the White House who may well, we need to even stop talking about this in the future, who has already turned our government into an instrument of autocracy. We now have our Justice Department investigating people that Donald Trump views as his enemies, his perceived enemies. The Justice Department actually investigated Hillary Clinton to see if there was any possible reason to put her in jail. This actually happened. They actually investigated the former FBI director, James Comey, and his assistant, Andrew McCabe, to see if there was anything that they did when they were looking into Russian interference in the election that might have been wrong, that they could use to put James Comey and Andrew McCabe in jail. They actually did. They couldn't find anything in either case, but they actually did these investigations. They are purging the Justice Department of lawyers who are impartial and replacing them with Trump toadies. This has happened in the Justice Department, in the Environmental Protection Agency. They moved all the scientists out to St. Louis, Missouri, which stripped them of half their scientists, and they are essentially persecuting the scientists who believe in climate change and hiring scientists who don't believe in climate change and who think pollution is just fine, thank you very much. In the Interior Department, same deal. They've gotten rid of many of the scientists, and they're now selling off our public lands, including some sacred Native American sites. It's insane. We need to talk about it. 877-378-8669. Call now. Boar vanishes into the brush and a rabbit appears. The hunter is off in a new direction. The book ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World by Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Carol Leonnig. She is a national investigative reporter with the Washington Post and the co-author of this extraordinary new book with Philip Rucker, The Very Stable Genius, Donald J. Trump's Testing of America. Carol, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Tom. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for joining us. The website, by the way, is a very stablegeniusbook.com. And Carol's Twitter handle is Carol, Leonnig. Carol, what, in researching this, I know you go all the way back to the beginning of the Trump presidency. What are the things that you saw early on that have continued that, many of us saw and thought were, well, these were aberrations and, the adults in the room will take control of this, that now have essentially metastasized, the behaviors and perspectives?
One of the things that's so striking about the trajectory of this presidency is increasingly the guardrails are gone. The people who offered counsel, advice, cautions, warnings, expertise, they have been pushed out of the room with increasing alacrity and concern on the part of the people that are left behind. And today, in recent weeks, rather, you've seen the president take that even another notch forward by now deciding he's got a litmus test for loyalty, even among political appointees that he's chosen. He wants to get the most loyal, the most, what we describe in the book as folks who are most likely to give him the answer yes. That trajectory is worried. Go ahead.
Well, no, finish your thought. My apologies.
That trajectory has really worried the people that are left behind because the president was already making decisions in an impulsive way without a really very rigorous process, without accepting cautions and warnings. And now you have a lot of people, for example, John Kelly, tried to stop the president from doing things that he felt were against the law or things that he thought would be deleterious to the country's security. He was replaced as chief of staff by Mick Mulvaney, who agreed to withhold the aid from Ukraine that was so essential to them as part of an effort that was going on in the administration to pressure Ukraine to announce an investigation of the president's rivals, the Bidens. So it's that caution and warning and good counsel to yes men that is sort of getting a lot of gas at the moment.
We have a number of conservative and Republican guests who come on this show, pretty much our only guests, because I debate them, and generally that's it's an interesting and entertaining part of the show, but I've gotten to know a number of these people. And back about 2 years ago, one of them made the comment to me that the number one way to get a job in the Trump administration is to spend a lot of money at the Trump Hotel and be there a lot and be seen there a lot, and to show up on Fox News and praise the president no matter what. And if you do those two things, you may well get a job in the administration. And that's common knowledge among the people who hang out at the bar at the Trump Hotel. A. And then B, I was talking with a Democratic member of Congress last week who told me that the rumor is that the principal profiling strategy that is being used by the Trump folks who are vetting not just political appointees, but even bureaucrats, even people who work within agencies in Washington, D.C., is the publicly available campaign contribution records, that people who have donated to Democratic candidates will be purged or will be sidelined, and people who have donated to Trump in particular and Republican candidates more generally will be lined up for promotion. Those are both really alarming things, but I don't have anything to back up either of them. They both fall into the category of rumor. In your research, did you find anything that might back those up?
Well, your first allegation is definitely borne out in our reporting at the Washington Post. People who show up on Fox News, we've written stories about how well that correlates to getting jobs, being appointed to certain positions or panels. It is a huge help. Again, remember, the president spends, unlike other presidents, much of his morning watching television, including his favorites on Fox News, and TiVos, or DVRs, other Fox News programs, to make sure he catches them all. He's literally made decisions on the fly and tweeted announcements based on themes or suggestions he's heard on Fox News, sometimes in pretty horrific error, but it motivates and inspires him. It's one of his sort of best idea boxes. So it makes sense that it's a place where he looks for appointees.
Yeah. And the purges that are coming? The source of information for them?
There's definitely a purge going on right now, which we've also reported on, that has to do with the political appointees. As for public servants, there are laws governing how you can or cannot move career public service employees. I share your view about that being alarming. One of the best things about the executive branch is that there are people who've been there through all sorts of presidencies and administrations, and their real goal is just facts, information, and implementation. Yes, people at EPA are at EPA because they care about the environment and reducing emissions into the air that cause asthma among children, and which has been on the downward trend because of their efforts. So yes, they care about that, but they're not political or partisan. Yes, people are at the CDC because they care about public health, but they're not partisan in trying to burnish the image of a Republican or a Democrat. And that cadre of fact-based implementers is an important army that every president needs, and it is at a state of incredible demoralization that I've never seen before. It's very worrisome because they're the people that keep us safe in many ways. Right. As you saw yesterday about the coronavirus, the political appointee couldn't answer basic questions about coronavirus. He has to rely on that cadre, and my hope and faith is that they're working their tails off and they're not demoralized, and that they're caring about their mission, regardless of what the president is doing in terms of considering a purge.
Another concern that I've heard, and I heard this from a political consultant in Washington, D.C., who mostly works with Republican candidates, it was that in Florida in 2000, the Florida legislature, I believe, passed or was prepared to pass legislation that said that the Florida electors all had to go for George Bush, regardless of how the vote recount came out. That got stopped by the Supreme Court intervening, but that was brought to the floor of the House by the Republicans in Florida, I believe, at least according to this consultant, after the Florida Supreme Court ordered a recount, that the state legislatures have that power. The Constitution does not give the power to the governors; it gives it to the legislatures to determine the electoral votes. And that there was a shout out to that in the Bush v. Gore decision by Rehnquist explicitly, where he said, yes, this is something a state can do, and that there are conversations now in several of the red states among Republicans, particularly in Wisconsin, about the possibility of actually having the legislature decide what the electoral vote is going to be, regardless of what the people decide, if there's enough noise made that there was voter fraud in that election, that people, Hispanics who are not citizens were voting, that black people were in buses going from city to voting. These are both allegations that Donald Trump has made repeatedly and Republicans constantly make on Fox News. In your reporting on this for your new book, A Very Stable Genius, Donald J. Trump's Testing of America, did you find anything, looking forward like that, this kind of, you could call it a conspiracy theory, but like I said, it actually happened in Florida, or nearly happened in Florida in 2000?
It's really interesting. It's not at all something we dealt with in the book. Our book's a portrait of Donald Trump, not speculation about different maneuvering that could be executed to try to give him the second term, or, as some conspiracy theorists say, to give him a third term. So that's not where we travel in the book. But it is a good opportunity to stress something. We call this book A Very Stable Genius, in part because it's the president's own description of himself, and because so many people who work for him do not describe him that way. But let's give the president credit where credit is due. He is a genius at marketing himself, burnishing his image. His North Star has been every day trying to see how he can shape the narrative to his best benefit and effect, and he's done a fantastic job of that. If he wins a second term, it will be because of that marketing skill that he's shown himself so adept at to date.
Yeah. A remarkable book, a remarkable analysis of the Trump administration up to this point. The new book, A Very Stable Genius, Donald J. Trump's Testing of America by Phil Rucker and Carol Leonnig. Carol, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. I really appreciate you coming on. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what'd you think of the debate last night? Has it changed your mind? Are you more or less in favor of anybody? Give us a shout. And welcome back. Whew, what a day, huh? Susan in Inglis, Florida. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Well, Tom, I had been cruising through the social media, and I saw an article on the Florida Democrats were trying to keep Bernie off of the primary ballot, although he's already on it, and they were going to try to disregard the mail-in ballots and hold them because they considered Bernie not a part of the Democratic Party. I was hoping that I could ask Congressman Pocan about it, but maybe you can address some of these concerns. I'm a Bernie supporter, naturally, so it really got my attention.
Yeah. Well, there may be people in the Democratic Party who don't like Bernie or who don't like, fill in the blank, but I think that the election systems and the election apparatus generally in most states try pretty rigorously to be nonpartisan. Florida when you go back and you look at the 2000 election in Florida, actually, there was some good evidence of nonpartisanship. There were a few places where you had to scratch your head and wonder what was going on. So I wouldn't be so concerned about that, Susan. My biggest concern would be that the governor of the state, what's his name? Ron DeSantis. Thank you. That DeSantis is working to throw people off the voting rolls because they're black, because they're college students, because they're over 65. The people who tend to vote Democratic and or Hispanic. And that really needs to be where our attention is focused like a laser, is what this guy is doing to the voting rolls. And we need to be making sure that our friends and neighbors and people that we are in contact with on social media and whatnot, who are in those communities, people who are Hispanic, people who are African American, people who are students, people who are older, that they double check their voter registration with the state of Florida, because it could vanish any day. And if your voter registration goes away, you will be given a provisional ballot and it will not count. So you need to make sure that you get your registration reinstated. Have you checked your voter registration in Florida, Susan?
Oh, yes, Tom. I have my ballot here, all stamped, ready to go.
Good.
What I was concerned is when I had read this on social media from, one of those postings like in Raw or whatever, that they were going to try to block Bernie from being a candidate in the...
but he is on your primary ballot, right?
Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. So any attempt to block him was not successful. And I think it's probably very, very safe to say that when the ballots come in, they run them through the scanning machines, that they're not going to be taking the Bernie ballots and tossing them in the trash. There was an election person up in Pennsylvania who tried that in 2016 or 18, and there were 7 people that were arrested, and several of them actually went to prison for doing that kind of thing. And so, word travels. I think that it's pretty unlikely, Susan. I wouldn't worry so much about it.
Yeah, because I've always been an independent until 16, and I registered Democratic specifically so I could vote for Bernie.
Yeah, well, good for you. Voting in the primaries is important. In those states that have closed primaries like Florida, you actually have to register as a Democrat. And if you're not registered as a Democrat, re-register. You can change, in most states, you can change your voter registration online. I believe in all states. I could be wrong, but certainly in most states. Susan, thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV down there in Florida. We'll be right back. It's 21 minutes past the hour. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. We have a special video up over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program, and it's about how a letter that the IRS sent out to 3.9 million Americans saved 700 lives. And you're like, wait a minute, the IRS saved 700 lives? How did that happen? Well, it had to do with Obamacare, and it's a fascinating story. And it turns out that this analysis of this IRS mailing was actually the first time that the federal government has done a study that actually proved that people having access to health care produces fewer deaths. For every 1,648 people who got the letter, there was 1 fewer premature death. I'll explain the whole thing in the video. It's as I said, it's available over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and it is really worth checking out. And it's a great ad, essentially, for our national health care system. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, I wanted to give you my thoughts on last night's debate. It was fascinating. I thought that, obviously, the moderators did just a pathetic job of controlling things. That minute or so where Bernie Sanders had been name-checked, and so he was responding, and then Pete Buttigieg decided that he was going to literally talk over him for the entire minute. It was a Fox News moment. I mean, that's how they do things on Fox News. It's not the kind of thing that CNN would ever tolerate. It's not the kind of thing that happens on MSNBC. It's not the kind of thing that happens on this show. And I was just astonished that neither of the moderators said either, Mayor Buttigieg, stop, your turn is coming up, or Senator Sanders, stop, your turn is coming up. Somebody should have put an end to that. It happened multiple times. This is really a failure of the moderators, frankly. But I thought, if you just kind of go through the candidates and look at what's going on. First of all, let me just tell you, Mitch McConnell is starting to get worried about Bernie Sanders. This is remarkable. This was yesterday afternoon. Mitch McConnell was talking to reporters about Bernie Sanders being the nominee, and somebody said, "Well, if Sanders is the nominee, you guys are really going to be happy, aren't you?" And this is what McConnell said, and I'm quoting. "I'm reminded of when the Democrats back in 1980 were all pulling for Ronald Reagan to be the nominee because they thought he'd be the easiest to beat." Mitch McConnell is worried about Bernie Sanders. That is pretty amazing. And I think it's a legitimate concern. Ronald Reagan had a movement behind him, a conservative movement, and Bernie Sanders has a movement behind him, a progressive movement, and that's a good thing. I thought Joe Biden did a good job in the debate, although he said he was running for the United States Senate, and that if you don't like him, you should vote for the other Bidens. Those were, moments that got amplified by Stephen Colbert and some of the other people as fun. But by and large, he didn't flub anything, and I thought he did a decent job. CBS News, obviously, the big loser. I already riffed on that. I think Elizabeth Warren, she was one of the few candidates who was not saying the way to win this debate is to talk over other people or is to yell them down or things like that. Her performance wasn't quite as strong as she was in the previous week, but she did a great job. There's a great summary, by the way, with which I largely agree, from the Daily Kos staff over on Daily Kos, winner and losers in the South Dakota primary or debate. I thought Amy Klobuchar was weak, frankly. She's calling out to the mushy middle, I just didn't see her having a stellar performance. She did get she had one good line in there that I thought was pretty solid. I thought Bernie Sanders did really well. Basically, the first 20 questions were, please tell us why you hate Bernie Sanders, or please tell us why you hate somebody else. You'll recall in 2016, in the Republican debates, most of the questions coming from the media, from the big networks and the media stars who were asking the questions, were about how terrible Hillary is, or how terrible the Democrats are, or how the Democrats got Obamacare and what are you going to do to fix it, and things like that, giving the Republican candidates an opportunity to attack Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. In these debates, I have noticed a consistent theme. They never ask about how bad Donald Trump is. They never ask about specific Trump policies. They never give the Democratic candidates an opportunity to attack Donald Trump. Instead, they ask them to attack each other. And I think that's pathetic. Yeah, I think it's disgusting. I think it's wrong. And I think we need to point that out. But Bernie did really well last night. I thought Pete Buttigieg embarrassed himself for a whole minute talking over Bernie Sanders. I thought that was terrible. It looked bad. It sounded bad. It was a mess. And you would think that Pete Buttigieg would know better. And I think the billionaires on stage, Tom Steyer, I agree with Daily Kos too on this, that both Mike Bloomberg and Tom Steyer, came off as, what the hell are these people doing here? I know Bloomberg is still out there, buying massive numbers of ads. He's now showing up as with his ads on the Axios newsletter that I get every morning. He's becoming ubiquitous, but I don't think he has a chance at winning this primary. But we'll see. We'll see. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. I'll get your thoughts and your calls about last night's debate right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's the place where smart people get their news, the Thom Hartmann Program. Your thoughts on the debate right after this. Okay, the magic phone number is 877-378-8669 if you want to support this program and you want to support Free Speech TV. Any donations given after the first 10 minutes of our show are attributed to this program, and so we really appreciate it if you would call 877-378-8669, and make your gift. The Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker is a $20 premium with a $20 contribution. You know, $20, it's like, that's, at least here in Portland, you know, that's the cost of an inexpensive meal in a restaurant, you know, going out one night. $20. If you please help Free Speech TV. They need this network needs your help. This network runs on your contribution. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With the $20 gift, you can also get a car magnet to get the vote out. And the car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" Yesterday, I read the wrong side of the screen. I was like, what? A car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" And it's great. I mean, this is something we need to get out there, right? With a $50 contribution, you get the Just Effing Vote canvas tote bag. And it's a nice, you know, good solid canvas tote bag. With a $75 gift, you get a coffee mug. The Thom Hartmann Tag Your It coffee mug, which is kind of cool. I need to get one of those myself so I can wave it in front of the TV screen here. With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, with a $240 gift, hang out. You know, you'll get an invitation. We work out the time so it works for people. We tend to try to do it in relatively small groups, 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the most. And, you know, we get together on Zoom or on Skype or whatever, you know, the engineers work out, and have an off-the-record, not recorded, just, you know, just us conversation. And some of them have been absolutely fascinating, where you can ask anything you want, and I'll tell you my unvarnished thoughts, which I generally do here on TV, but sometimes we can drill a little deeper and have, you know, more in-depth conversation, especially one-on-one. So that's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get the Get Out the Vote pack. That's a set of Free Speech TV host postcards to send to friends and family to encourage them to watch our programs and know about Free Speech TV. You get a car magnet to get out the vote. It says, "I'm voting, are you?" You get the Just Effing Vote tote bag, and you get my new book, The Hidden History of the Republican War on Voting. The word Republican is not in the title. I begged my publisher to put it in there, and they were like, "Well, that would seem too partisan." But it's true. So anyhow, you get the book. With a $360 gift, which could be $30 a month for a year, you get the entire collection of my hidden history books so far. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. That's with a $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and, you know, hang out in our studio here for the last hour of the show. You can see how Sean and Nate and Lise and Joyce, you know, make all this magic here, and you won't see Nigel and Sue, who are, you know, doing the back end stuff on the web and you know, putting together our newsletter with our our free newsletter. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Every single day, it's got a link to every single story that I've referenced, and it only goes to people who sign up for it. We don't sell the list; it's just ours. But Sue puts that together, and it's great stuff. You won't see Dave, our engineer. There's a bunch of great people working on the program. But our frontline folks are all here every day right here in the studio, and they're looking forward to meeting you. And then I'm looking forward to taking you out to lunch. And, you know, we'll have a nice lunch and a nice conversation. There's a couple restaurants just right around the corner here. So that's with a $1,000 gift. Come to Portland for the meet and greet. And, you know, those are our premiums. The bottom line, though, is this is a critical time for America. We are at a crossroads. We have a man in the White House who may well, you know, we need to even stop talking about this in the future, who has already turned our government into an instrument of autocracy. We now have our Justice Department investigating people that Donald Trump views as his enemies, his perceived enemies. The Justice Department actually investigated Hillary Clinton to see if there was any possible reason to put her in jail. This actually happened. They actually investigated the former FBI director, James Comey, and his assistant, Andrew McCabe, to see if there was anything that they did when they were looking into Russian interference in the election that might have been wrong, that they could use to put James Comey and Andrew McCabe in jail. They actually did. They couldn't find anything in either case, but they actually did these investigations. They are purging the Justice Department of lawyers who are impartial and replacing them with Trump toadies. This has happened in the Justice Department, in the Environmental Protection Agency. They moved all the scientists out to St. Louis, Missouri, which stripped them of half their scientists, and they are essentially persecuting the scientists who believe in climate change and hiring scientists who don't believe in climate change and who think pollution is just fine, thank you very much. In the Interior Department, same deal. They've gotten rid of many of the scientists, and they're now selling off our public lands, including some sacred Native American sites. It's insane. We need to talk about it. 877-378-8669. Call now. Happens when we lose biodiversity. Margaret Butler from the Extinction Rebellion is here about the activists fighting against oil trains and what happened to them. Dr. David Reichmuth also joins me on the impact of electric cars and find out why people are adding mushrooms to their coffee. That's the Science Revolution, wherever fine podcasts are available. And I will be signing books, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, the Republican War on Voting, Friday night at 7:30 at Powell's on Burnside here in Portland, Oregon, and Sunday at noon at Frugal Muse Books in Darien, Illinois. And, no need to register for either one of them. It's free, no admission. So be there or be square, and I look forward to seeing you. It's, I've got a pretty good little stump speech here about the book that I think will pop your eyeballs up. Whoa, really? Bring your friends. Bring your skeptical friends. It's gonna be a good show. Yesterday I mentioned what Louise and I are doing to prepare for the possibility that the coronavirus becomes as ubiquitous in the United States as the common cold, which, or at least as the flu, which is increasingly looking to be the case, and essentially is what the director of the Centers for Disease Control said yesterday. This is coming, get ready. And, I mentioned that the principal thing, if you can't avoid getting an infection, your number one way to survive the infection, because most people who get this only get a mild case. Some people don't even show any symptoms at all. Some people get a more severe case, but then it goes away. It knocks them down the way the flu knocks you down. And a very small percentage, it looks like it's around 2%, die from it. And I'm guessing that when we really start seeing the numbers, it'll probably be closer to 1%, because there's so many people who have mild symptoms who don't go to the hospital or anything and never get diagnosed, at least in China. And, we're starting to see some real numbers from what appears to be good science out of, for example, that cruise ship and, what's happening in Italy right now. But one of the, so number one, get healthy. And, start eating good food. Start eating a lot of fruits and vegetables and a lot of high fiber foods, and get yourself in good health, and, start taking a walk every day to strengthen your lungs, because this is a lung infection, number one. Number two, and this is fascinating, I just caught this in the New York Times just a few minutes ago. In China, the information is now out from the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They just published a huge analysis, and they said that the death rate from this coronavirus was 2.8% among men and 1.7% among women. Now, what accounts for that difference appears to be not so much that men and women are different in terms of their gender, but that in China, men are more likely to smoke and women are less likely to smoke. And this is a disease of the lungs. So if you're concerned about the coronavirus coming to the United States, and you should be, it doesn't mean you panic, it doesn't mean you freak out, but if you're concerned about it coming and you smoke, quit right now. Vape, quit right now. These things compromise the ability of your lungs to respond to a viral infection, and thus increase the chances that if you get that viral infection, you will die from it. And that's not a good thing, right? So quit smoking. I mean, that's I think probably the number one thing. The other thing is, Louise and I have, this is not weird prepper stuff. This again was suggested in the New York Times yesterday, that have a couple weeks worth of food around, and I'm talking about things like canned beans or dried beans. What Louise and I have is mostly beans and rice. just a couple pounds, enough to last a couple weeks, because people do panic even when it's not warranted. You see this when a tornado's coming or a giant storm or something like that. Suddenly the stores are empty. We saw this, Louise and I saw this in 1972 when Nixon was president, when he put wage and price controls on as a result of the Arab oil embargo, and the Teamsters struck, and literally in 48 hours there was no food in the stores in Detroit, and that lasted for about a week. And so, that kind of thing might happen. So, no need to panic, no need to go into full prepper mode or become, in my opinion, like, a Mormon and have a year's worth of food stored in your basement. But, get a couple of weeks' food so you don't have to be concerned. And then the other thing I didn't mention yesterday that I do want to mention today, I take a medication for blood pressure. I take a very small dose of a drug called candesartan. My wife, Louise, she takes a medication, Synthroid, for her thyroid. And we went to our doctors. They looked up both these drugs. They're both generic, and they're both manufactured, in one case, from raw ingredients in China that are then put into pills in India, and in the other case, actually manufactured in China and come right to the United States from China. And so our doctors gave us a 3-month prescription for each of those drugs. And generally, a pharmacy won't fill a 3-month prescription, but have your doctor write on the prescription pad for vacation travel. And in fact, Louise got challenged at the pharmacy. They said, what is this? And Louise is like, well, I'm going to be in and out of town a lot over the next 3 months, and I don't have to be worrying about when I run out of what's an essential medication. And they didn't give me a hard time. They just filled the script for me. But you have to have that on there apparently for the insurance company to pay for it. So anyhow, that's the deal. And back to your calls. Matt in Chicago. Matt, you are our caller of the day. You're going to get an autographed copy of your choice of one of my hidden history books, The War on Voting, The Guns and the Second Amendment to the Supreme Court. Which one are you choosing?
Supreme Court.
Cool. Okay. I will autograph it to you this afternoon, and Joyce will get it in the mail. And thanks for calling. What's on your mind today?
Well, like you, I thought that Pete Buttigieg speaking over Bernie Sanders last night was just abysmal, but it really demonstrated the moderator's inability to control the entire debate.
Yes.
I felt like that was their goal. This is all about corporate media. How do we divide this stage of Democratic nominees and make them all look bad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, and I think that, and we've seen this in debate after debate after debate. Again, I refer you back to 2016 when the moderators were asking the Republicans to attack Hillary Clinton and to attack the Democrats or Democratic policies like health care for all, and now you've got moderators asking Democrats to attack each other. And and it's all about creating that train wreck because people slow down for fistfights and car wrecks, and that's and this is what do you call it? Viewer ratings-driven television, and that's what they're trying to get the top ratings. I thought it was just an absolute train wreck. I thought it was an embarrassment. I was very, very disappointed in the moderators, and frankly, I was very disappointed in the candidates who decided that talking over somebody who was speaking was somehow the smart and slick thing to do. Man, thanks a lot for the call, and congratulations on being our caller of the day. Ben in Hood River, Oregon. Hey, Ben, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. How are you today?
Great. What's up?
I just wanted to call in and say that I'm personally endorsing Bernie Sanders. He is the only candidate as far as I'm concerned. Pete Buttigieg is just a young face on old money. Warren is an acceptable second place, but has kind of alienated Bernie supporters. And Bloomberg is just Trump, but smarter. And that is
richer.
Almost more scary to me. Sorry, say again?
And richer.
And richer, yes, he's richer, so he's even less likely to respect the rule of law. He's actually has experience as an executive. He's less likely to blunder and gaffe all the time. He's got the NDAs, so the predation is a question. He's got stop and frisk, so his record on race is not great. He's basically Trump, but smarter and richer, and that scares me almost more than anything else.
Yeah.
So it's Sanders as far as I'm concerned. What do you think, Tom?
Well, I think Bernie Sanders is no doubt the strongest candidate. I think he has the largest movement behind him. I think he's the most likely candidate to bring out large numbers of voters who might have sat out the 2016 election because they weren't excited by Hillary Clinton. I think that Elizabeth Warren, if anything were to happen to Bernie, God forbid, or if Elizabeth Warren were simply to win, the primaries, that she could probably capture most of the Bernie voters because their policies are so very, very similar. And I think it's been a strategic mistake for her to attack Bernie in the last 2 debates. I don't think that helps her.
Yeah.
But she's got consultants in her ear telling her this is the only way to do it, and I think that's unfortunate. Ben, thanks for the call. Good on you. Carol in Clinton, Illinois. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Well, I want to know why in these debates they are really missing the whole issue, which is, do you want an authoritarian government that'll go into a dictatorship, or do you want a real republic that's a democracy?
Yeah.
And what are you losing if you choose the authoritarian, which will eventually, Trump will be a dictator?
Yes, I agree.
What are we gaining if we stay in a democracy? Let's not argue about, do you want Medicare for all? You won't have that choice later on.
Yeah, or
it's right on the bit.
Yeah, or it's not impossible that you end up with an authoritarian dictator who does things that people like. I mean, Hitler built the Autobahn and started the Volkswagen, and people loved him for it. In 1937, Hitler was the most popular politician in the world. It's why he was in the cover of Time magazine that year. And then, of course, he invaded Poland, and that was the beginning of the end for everything. So, these authoritarian tendencies that we are seeing with Donald Trump right now, and that I am nervous about with Mayor Bloomberg, are something that we all need to have on our radar screens. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour, taking your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Oh, and I've got to tell you, and I will after the break, about why the audience response last night seemed so weird. Stick around. And welcome back. David in Seattle, listening on KBCS. Hey, David, what's up?
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I just, real quick, I just wanted to kind of get your take on what's happening with the Trump administration and their actions, because I have never in my lifetime seen any government anywhere in the world try so hard to piss people off. It's almost like they're actually itching for a fight, and they're trying to provoke us to do something. What do you think?
Yeah, they are. Donald Trump is trying to tear America apart. He's tearing the federal government apart. I think he's doing that for his own personal reasons. He's helping out autocrats in other countries where he has Trump properties or wants to have Trump properties, or autocrats who have for whom he's been laundering money for years and years, and that he's using this as a way of tearing apart the American electorate. I'm completely with you, and I think it's mind-boggling, frankly. But that's what it is. Penelope in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Penelope, what's up?
Hi, I'm a first-time caller. I love your show.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Just fine.
Okay. I heard on Democracy Now!, which is just before your show, that the tickets that were sold or to guarantee seats at that debate last night in South Carolina were from $1,000 to $3,200.
It was from $1,700 to $3,200. Yes. And so what you had basically in the audience were wealthy people.
Okay, did that money go to Joe Biden, or did it go to somebody that was up there in the debate?
That money went to the South Carolina Democratic Party, is my understanding, and these were donations. So what you had were in the audience were people who were capable of writing a $2,000 check, and when half of America can't even deal with a $400 expense, a medical expense, when 60% of America can't deal with $1,000 medical expense or automobile expense without it really provoking a crisis for them. I think it's safe to say that with the working class people and poor people and people of color who share those categories were not well represented in the audience in last night's debate, and I'm going to talk about that right after the break. But you spot on. You're absolutely right. Thanks a lot for the call, Penelope. Jessica in Riverside, Illinois. Hey, Jessica. Thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi. I totally agree with you about Pete. He's rude and arrogant. But I also wanted to say I read an article in the Washington Post, and it was so concerning. It talked about the Americans that were evacuated from Japan from the Princess cruise ship.
Yes.
And they were put in the buses headed for the airport. They sat in those buses for 2.5 hours while the State Department argued with the CDC.
Right.
The CDC told them they didn't want the 14 infected people with the virus, with the healthy people.
Right.
And the State Department overrides the CDC.
Right, and apparently it was because the State Department didn't want the expense of having 2 separate airplanes.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
And I have one other thing. I have a question for you. I was driving in the car, and on MSNBC, a reporter was talking with a couple that was quarantined, and the couple was telling them about how their situation was.
Jessica, get to your question right away because we got 10 seconds.
Oh, the woman said it was 80 degrees in there. The husband fixed a leak in the washroom. That couple has never been heard of again. I think it's already a cover-up.
It may be. It may be, Jessica. Thank you for the call. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. And I will be signing that book Friday night, along with giving a talk about it. Quite a little riff here that I've worked up that we did in Seattle, we did it in Los Angeles, we did it in San Francisco. I'll be doing it in Portland Friday night at 7:30 at Powell's and Burnside, and Sunday at noon in Darien, Illinois, suburban Chicago, at the Frugal Muse bookstore, where I've been many times, and many of you have seen me there. It'd be nice to see you again. Jimmy in Akron, Ohio. Hey, Jimmy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Had to be patient to get there to speak to you, but I love your show.
Thank you.
And thank God you're there. And, there's a word of truth that's coming out of our age of information.
Yeah, so what's on your mind, Jimmy? What's your question or comment?
Daily trauma. This Trump thing, I'm always been a Democrat voter, but this guy has got me into such a tizzy. I have to check the news every couple hours to see if he's dead yet.
Well, let's not look at it that way, Jimmy. I mean, let's not wish death on anybody.
There's no way to put it, but that's the damn truth.
Yeah, I check the news regularly to see if if he's blown up democracy yet. But and people and Jimmy, my apologies, I'm dropping you off the call here. When people call in and start talking about any politician dying, I get real uncomfortable. I don't think it's an appropriate conversation to be having on the air, or at least on this program. I'm not willing to do it. RJ in Greenville, Michigan. Hey, RJ, thanks for listening to 1680 AM. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you again. What do you think of the idea of forming a coalition of wealthy patriots like Tom Steyer and Mike Bloomberg and the members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and liberal groups and volunteers across the nation to educate the public and push for ballot initiatives across all 50 states? We can call it the Democracy's Bill of Rights, whatever. We can put on that initiative, make voting an inalienable right, eliminate all private money from our elections, and publicly fund all elections. What do you think of this idea? I mean, it seems to me that this is exactly what we need. We need to get the public involved, and if you think it's a good idea, Tom, you could be the biggest proponent of this idea. You have a listening audience that's huge.
Yeah. Well, here's the problem with ballot initiatives, RJ. About half our states allow citizens to either put legislation before their legislatures, pass legislation, or even pass constitutional amendments by ballot initiative. It varies from state to state, but those are the three options typically. And for example, in Washington state, in the 2018 election, the governor of the state, who is a big proponent, he ran for president, a big proponent of climate change, and Jay Inslee. Jay Inslee got on the ballot an initiative to have a carbon tax in Washington state. It was a very modest carbon tax. It wouldn't have had much impact, frankly, on the average person, but it would have sucked some money and some of the subsidy for carbon out of the state. I live in Portland, and so our local TV stations and even Sling and the ways that you can get TV on the internet, Roku and whatnot, now they can slice and dice the advertising. So we're seeing the ads for the Washington state market because the city of Vancouver is right over the bridge from us, right over the river, and it's one of the probably 5 largest cities in Washington state, and they had a former Secretary of State who looked and talked like Mr. Rogers. He was just the nicest looking guy, and he comes on TV wearing his cardigan sweater. All he was missing was the pipe. It was just like right out of the 1950s. And he was a Republican, but he never identified himself as a Republican. Instead, he said, "Hi, I'm Joe Blow, and I was the Secretary of State for the state of Washington. And I just wanted to tell you that this carbon tax is going to bankrupt the state. It's going to cost the average family thousands of dollars. It's going to throw us into an economic upheaval, and it's going to make Washington state the least competitive state in the union. It's going to ruin our business base. It's going to do terrible, terrible things. Please vote no on this ballot initiative." Now, all of those things were lies, but you can lie in a political ad. The guy was a Republican Secretary of State. He had been hired by the fossil fuel industry to make this ad. None of that was disclosed in the ad. You had to go online to find that out. In fact, I was like, after about the 10th time I saw the ad, I was like, who the hell is this guy? Because he seems so nice, And the fossil fuel industry spent tens of millions of dollars saturating the airwaves of the state of Washington with that ad, and so that carbon ballot initiative that had 70% support when Jay Inslee got it on the ballot failed by about 10 points when the vote finally happened because big money came in and changed the vote. And that's the danger with ballot initiatives. It's just, it's kind of an analog of the danger of having a legislature pass legislation when they are taking money from lobbyists also. And it's one of the reasons why we need to get money out of politics. We need to get it out of politics with regard to ballot initiatives, just like we need to get it out of politics with regard to regular legislative processes. Both are now vulnerable. And this was my second book on the Supreme Court and the betrayal of America. Both are now vulnerable because of the Supreme Court changing the rules of the game of politics and making it so that billionaires and fossil fuel industries and other very, very wealthy industries can basically do whatever the hell they want. So, RJ, I love your idea. And, that hey, let's get an activated citizenry out there and let's do things by ballot initiative. But before we can think that this is any kind of a panacea or is going to fix anything, we've got to get the money out of politics. Ballot initiatives are legal in Michigan, aren't they? Didn't you guys legalize pot by ballot initiative?
Actually, yes, we are. We got a ballot initiative to get absentee balloting for everybody, anybody who wants it. But now, I just have a question. How do we achieve this goal that we have? We know we have to have to
well, the best starting point is to pick issues that are going to turn out a lot of voters on the one hand, but are not going to produce a huge anti-initiative response from a specific industry that will dump millions of dollars on the other hand. Don't try to do single-payer health care by ballot initiative. You'll get wiped out, just like Jay Inslee got wiped out in Washington state with the carbon tax. But things like pot, legalizing marijuana, that will get Democratic voters out, and it's already the case in Michigan. It should be in other states. That'll get them out and help swing the election.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
fight back!
We have a special video up over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, and it's about how a letter that the IRS sent out to 3.9 million Americans saved 700 lives. And you're like, wait a minute, the IRS saved 700 lives? How did that happen? Well, it had to do with Obamacare, and it's a fascinating story. And it turns out that this analysis of this IRS mailing was actually the first time that the federal government has done a study that actually proved that people having access to health care produces fewer deaths. For every 1,648 people who got the letter, there was one fewer premature death. I'll explain the whole thing in the video. It's you know, as I said, it's available over at ThomHartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and it is really worth checking out. And it's a great ad, essentially, for our national health care system. Okay, the magic phone number is 877-378-8669 if you want to support this program and you want to support Free Speech TV. Any donations given after the first 10 minutes of our show are attributed to this program, and so we really appreciate it if you would call 877-378-8669 and make your gift. The Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker is a $20 premium with a $20 contribution. You know, $20, it's like, that's, at least here in Portland, you know, that's the cost of an inexpensive meal in a restaurant, you know, going out one night, $20. If you please help Free Speech TV. They need, this network needs your help. This network runs on your contribution. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With the $20 gift, you can also get a car magnet to get the vote out. And the car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" Yesterday, I read the wrong side of the screen. I was like, what? A car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" And it's great. I mean, this is something we need to get out there, right? With a $50 contribution, you get the Just Effing Vote canvas tote bag. And it's a nice, you know, good solid canvas tote bag. With a $75 gift, you get a coffee mug. The Thom Hartmann Tag Your It coffee mug, which is kind of cool. I need to get one of those myself so I can wave it in front of the TV screen here. With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, with a $240 gift, hang out. You know, you'll get an invitation. We work out the time so it works for people. We tend to try to do it in relatively small groups, 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the most. And, you know, we get together on Zoom or on Skype or whatever, you know, the engineers work out, and have an off-the-record, not recorded, just, you know, just us conversation. And some of them have been absolutely fascinating, where you can ask anything you want, and I'll tell you my unvarnished thoughts, which I generally do here on TV, but sometimes we can drill a little deeper and have, you know, more in-depth conversation, especially one-on-one. So that's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get the Get Out the Vote pack. That's a set of Free Speech TV host postcards to send to friends and family to encourage them to watch our programs and know about Free Speech TV. You get a car magnet to get out the vote. It says, "I'm voting, are you?" You get the Just Effing Vote tote bag, and you get my new book, The Hidden History of the Republican War on Voting. The word Republican is not in the title. I begged my publisher to put it in there, and they were like, "Well, that would seem too partisan." But it's true. So anyhow, you get the book. With a $360 gift, which could be $30 a month for a year, you get the entire collection of my hidden history books so far. The hidden history of the war on voting, the hidden history of the Supreme Court and the betrayal of America, the hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment. That's with a $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and hang out in our studio here for the last hour of the show. You can see how Sean and Nate and Lise and Joyce make all this magic here, and you won't see Nigel and Sue, who are doing the back end stuff on the web and putting together our newsletter with our long staff, our free newsletter. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Every single day, it's got a link to every single story that I've referenced, and it only goes to people who sign up for it. We don't sell the list; it's just ours. But Sue puts that together, and it's great stuff. You won't see Dave, our engineer. There's a bunch of great people working on the program. But our frontline folks are all here every day right here in the studio, and they're looking forward to meeting you. And then I'm looking forward to taking you out to lunch. And, we'll have a nice lunch and a nice conversation. There's a couple restaurants just right around the corner here. So that's with a $1,000 gift. Come to Portland for the meet and greet. And, those are our premiums. The bottom line, though, is this is a critical time for America. We are at a crossroads. We have a man in the White House who may well... we need to even stop talking about this in the future, who has already turned our government into an instrument of autocracy. We now have our Justice Department investigating people that Donald Trump views as his enemies, his perceived enemies. The Justice Department actually investigated Hillary Clinton to see if there was any possible reason to put her in jail. This actually happened. They actually investigated the former FBI director, James Comey, and his assistant, Andrew McCabe, to see if there was anything that they did when they were looking into Russian interference in the election that might have been wrong that they could use to put James Comey and Andrew McCabe in jail. They actually did. They couldn't find anything in either case, but they actually did these investigations. They are purging the Justice Department of lawyers who are impartial and replacing them with Trump toadies. This has happened in the Justice Department, in the Environmental Protection Agency. They moved all the scientists out to St. Louis, Missouri, which stripped them of half their scientists, and they are essentially persecuting the scientists who believe in climate change and hiring scientists who don't believe in climate change and who think pollution is just fine, thank you very much. In the Interior Department, same deal. They've gotten rid of many of the scientists, and they're now selling off our public lands, including some sacred Native American sites. It's insane. We need to talk about it. 877-378-8669. Call now. Sleep. He read.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Nele Marien, Forestry and Biodiversity Framework Coordinator with Friends of the Earth International, FOEI, as in Friends of Earth International.org is their website. And Nele's Twitter handle is NELEMARIEN. Nele, welcome to the program.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk about mass extinctions here. Mass extinctions not only weaken frankly, the web of life, they also endanger humans. What is the state of mass extinction? You know, we all saw Elizabeth Colbert's book a couple of years ago. You know, the sixth extinction, and it seems to be a consensus that we are in the sixth extinction. How fast is it moving? What is being done, and what can and should be done?
Yeah. I've bad news for you all, because we are indeed in the sixth mass extinction, and the previous one being the dinosaurs. So it's not an event that happens quick time around. And normally, you know, biodiversity is something that keeps on moving. Species appear and species disappear. But we are currently losing species at a rate of 1,000 times quicker than would naturally occur. So that is all but normal. And of course, the reason for this happening is human activity. But of course, it's not just human activity. Basically, it's our economy, the big sector, the corporations who are effectively constantly destroying biodiversity, the ecosystems, genetic diversity. All of these things are being destroyed at such a big rate that we actually are in the risk of a complete collapse about that.
So what are the specific actions that big corporations are taking in the United States and around the world that are endangering biodiversity, that are stripping the genetic diversity out of our food crops, and then in addition to that, biodiversity more broadly out of our external ecosystems?
Kind of all actions. You already mentioned agriculture is one of the big ones, and for many reasons. One of them is deforestation and just changing all kind of valuable ecosystems into monocrop land, which is hugely devastating, of course, for these previously valuable ecosystems. The other thing, and you also already mentioned in your question, is that normally even agriculture has a lot of biodiversity in it. Farmers used to have for thousands of years so many different plants, etc., and they used to interact with the insects and the birds and everything. All the biodiversity would be on the cropland as well. But nowadays we're having monoculture crop plantations, furthermore heavily sprayed by pesticides, which will not leave any other kind of diversity living on a cropland. So that effectively also kills biodiversity, not only on the cropland itself, but of course it has an impact further ahead of where the croplands are. So agriculture, especially industrial agriculture, is one of the main culprits of biodiversity loss. As Friends of the Earth, we always state that agroecology will really be an answer because, as I mentioned before, when you do agriculture in a way which really is taking into account all the different types of products and all the different varieties of agriculture that can be done, you can actually enhance biodiversity, and it's also good for the climate. So that's one of the first one, agriculture. But of course, all different kind of sectors come to mind as well. For example, if you have mining, and especially if we're talking about the big kinds of mining, the mountaintop removal, that is effectively destroying a whole ecosystem at a time. We can talk about fossil fuel extractions. We can talk about infrastructure. The amount of infrastructure which is being planned for the next 10, 20, 30 years is actually so big that in itself can destroy the biodiversity and the ecosystems of the world. And I'm sure I'm forgetting about several sectors, but we can come back to it.
Yeah, I get it. We're talking with Nele Marien, who is the Forestry and Biodiversity Framework Coordinator for the Friends of Earth International. FOEI.org is the website. What can individual persons do? I know as a consumer, my wife Louise and I, for I'd say probably all of our married life, we were vegetarians when we met back in the 60s. We've always tried to eat organic food. One of the things that I've noticed when we go into food co-ops, organic food stores, or farmers markets where there's a lot of organic food is that there's an extraordinary diversity, lots of different kinds of breeds of tomatoes and pears and apples and peppers and fill in the blanks. Whereas when you go to the supermarket and you're just looking at those food categories, you typically only see one or two species, those that are easily grown with lots of pesticides and in crappy soil, and those that will preserve well while they're shipped from one state to another. So it seems obvious that trying to buy organic food and buy locally is something that helps biodiversity at the agriculture level. Are there other things that individual consumers can do to help promote biodiversity? And what are the political levers? Where are the pressure points where we can encourage our politicians to do things that will stop harming biodiversity and start promoting biodiversity?
That's many questions at a time.
Sorry.
But first, that's totally all right. At a personal level, as a consumer, what you have been stating, it's completely right, and it relates back to what I was saying about the agricultural biodiversity. You are right. There's just so many different kinds of species of tomatoes and pears, etc. And consuming these makes us. We also strengthen the farmers, the family farmers, the small-scale farmers who use who use biological, organic ways of farming, and this is really enhancing biodiversity. So that is completely correct. And then, of course, consuming local products is always correct. So very fair and very good what you're doing there, and I would advise people to do that. But indeed, just at a consumer level only, we will not be able to change the system. We need to change the economic types of systems, and we need to change the powers which are behind this in order to be able to save biodiversity. And if it has to depend on individual consumers only, who quite often are not given the choice also. If everybody would decide tomorrow after hearing this interview, like, oh, I'll go to the shop and I'll buy only organic, then there is not sufficient organic food. So we have a systemic problem here. So therefore, we need systemic answers. And these systemic answers, they need to come from policymakers. So what we need to do is really make sure that these corporate actors who are causing, be it in the industrial agriculture sector and who are land grabbing, making huge scale agriculture, selling it on wholesale markets across the world with lots of speculation and with also high prices in supermarkets, making it inaccessible for people. These kind of things have to change, and we have to make sure that we get policies that actually get us back to local community where people know each other and where we can have trade just at a local level so that people can help each other. The same goes for other kind of corporations. I mean, of course, we will need certain amount of resources, but the amount of extraction of resources we're seeing currently in the world is completely unsustainable. And honestly speaking, most of it is for crap we actually don't need. We can be so much happier if we live together in smaller communities. And I mean, that doesn't mean we can't ever travel or something, and it doesn't mean we have to go back to the cave times. Not at all. But just taking away the power of these corporations who are actually extracting and trading us stuff that we don't need, having programmed obsolescence, by which I mean that they actually make products in such a way that they get destroyed very quickly, so we are forced to buy something new. These kind of things, they need to change through policies that actually force business to do the right thing.
And that means political action. That means getting politically involved. I would add just finally, my understanding is that if you eat a diverse spectrum of species in your food, you also get a diverse spectrum of micronutrients, so that it's a very healthy thing. Nele, Marien, the Forestry and Biodiversity Framework Coordinator with Friends of the Earth International, thanks so much for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And that's foei.org is the website. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of, our collective thoughts on the Democratic debate last night and where the Democratic Party is going right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Joe in Cupertino, California. Oops, wrong button. Joe in Cupertino, California. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, you must be in pretty good mood. I mean, we have 45 national delegates, and I thought that Bernie didn't hurt himself last night, but I was very unimpressed with CBS. I think that it was kind of like a ping pong match. Would go from Tom Steyer for 5 minutes, and he'd get the floor, then poof, go to the other side of the stage, and the other millionaire, he'd get to talk about stuff they didn't know about for another 5 minutes, and nobody else would and it just got ugly really quick. I think they did that on purpose. It's like awarding them the debate, but I have a concern, as you were suggesting, in the party's future. I'm going to bring up a man, I think you might know his name, Upton Sinclair.
Yeah, he wrote It Can't Happen Here back in, 1917 or something, or maybe it was the 1920s or 30s. Yeah.
He ran for governor as progressive, and we were really dire straits in California in the 30s, and he wanted to have this idea where we could put agriculture together and the profits would feed everybody. He brought forward the idea of the use of production, and that seemed to be something that FDR was talking about during the New Deal. But what had happened is that the state had, a large Republican support, and he had gotten a lot of support from the unemployed and everything like that, but he got the nomination, and just before the election for governor, the Democrats took him out because he was too progressive. And my concern is that that's what's happening here. You look at what happened with Buttigieg. I think he's kind of like this anybody but Bernie campaign that's being launched by, I think his name is James Knott. It's the Big Tent Project, where they don't want any socialist programs going through, so they're going to, act like they're supporting.
Yeah, James
the
Carville
guy.
is obviously, if he's not part of that crowd, he's sympathetic to them. What he had to say on Saturday was pathetic.
Yeah, I want to make sure that what I'm hearing, and I have a reliable source here, in California at least, that the voter turnout's not what it should be, and that we got to make sure that we make everybody get out and vote, because this is the only way that we're going to get our candidate to be the success that he can be, and we can turn the Senate at the same time. But it's got to be voter turnout, and I think now that this is over, we've seen the debate. Super Tuesday is going to be here in 6 days. We're going to pick this up if we can just keep the momentum going. And, the debate was a really good format, but I'm done with that. I think that fighting each other is not helping. We need to just go against Trump.
Well, part of the problem was, again, back in 2016, the questions that were given to the Republican candidates were not, hey, Jeb Bush, would you please pick on Donald Trump? The question was, hey, Jeb Bush, which of Obama's policies or which of Hillary Clinton's policies do you think is going to be most destructive? What do you think about Hillary Clinton's plan to expand the Affordable Care Act, for example? I mean, those were the kind of questions that were asked to the Republicans. They gave the Republican candidates an opportunity to attack the Democratic candidate. In this election, we know who the Republican candidate is going to be as Trump, but none of the questions have been about Trump. And that just blows my mind. I mean, it's a form of bias that is so obvious and so explicit that it just concerns me tremendously. So anyhow, Joe, thank you for the call. It's a good point that you're raising. We'll be back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, speaking the truths the multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about, and speaking them only right here. Thank you. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I believe I mentioned it earlier. If not, I think it's worth a little more careful scrutiny and a better riff. If you wanted to be in last night's South Carolina debate audience, which on a couple of occasions booed Bernie and applauded Bloomberg and Biden, you had to pay between $1,700 and $3,200 for the ticket. That's what it cost to be in the audience last night. So do you think that there were a lot of millennials in that audience? Do you think that there were a lot of working class people in that audience who could just easily write a $1,700 check or a $3,200 check to be in the audience? I don't. When half of American families can't deal with a $400 emergency expense, when 2/3 of American families can't deal with a $1,000 medical expense or emergency expense, I'm guessing that 2/3 of America was not represented in that audience last night. That required a donation to the South Carolina Democratic Party of $1,700 to $3,200 just to be in the audience. I mean, the first time they booed Bernie, I was scratching my head. I was like, really? Really? And what Bernie was saying, they said, well, how dare you say that it was a good thing that Cuba was educating all their people? And Bernie was like, Obama said the same thing. Right? I don't know, Nate, if you can pull that up easily or not. It'll take a second. Well, just let me know when you got it, and I'll play it. But Bernie kept trying to make this point last night, And I said yesterday, we played this clip on the air yesterday, and I said, you know, this is going to come up in the debate tonight. And if the moderators, if ABC News does not play this clip of Obama, they are being disingenuous. They are pretending that this is happening in a vacuum. And all Bernie said was the exact same thing that President Obama said just a few years ago while he was president. And you know, they use it as an attack against him. Here it is. This is President Obama.
And I said this to President Castro in Cuba. I said, look, you've made great progress in educating young people. Every child in Cuba gets a basic education. That's a huge improvement from where it was. Medical care. You know, the life expectancy of Cubans is equivalent to the United States, despite it being a very poor country, because they have access to health care. That's a huge achievement. They should be congratulated.
So this is what President Obama said. It's what Bernie Sanders said on 60 Minutes, although Bernie added to it. But, you know, the leadership are dictators, and we don't support that form of government, communist form of government. Bernie said that right out loud. He's attacked Maduro as a dictator in Venezuela. But when he pointed, you know, first of all, when he tried to answer the question, you know, they asked him the question, do you stand by your thing that education's a good thing? And Bernie said, yes, even in communist countries, it's good to have an education. And then Bernie and then they booed him. These people who paid $1,700 to $3,200 each to be in the audience. And then Bernie said, well, President Obama said the same thing. And, you know, everybody, you know, Buttigieg and everybody tried to jump in on top of him. And Joe Biden was trying to say, oh, he never said any such thing, or words to that effect. And they were all talking over Bernie while the audience is booing Bernie. And I'm going, where did this audience come from? And it wasn't until the second half of the debate that a few people on Twitter had found these local stories out of South Carolina where they were saying, hey, do you want to be in the audience? It'll only cost you $1,700. They're literally, the Democratic Party there as a fundraiser was selling these tickets. And then the penny fell for me, and I was like, oh, yeah, of course. Now I understand. Now I understand. Gary in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hey, Gary, what's up? Gary?
Yes.
You are on the air.
Okay. Thanks for taking my call. You know, I started to watch the debate last night, and it just turned into this dog and pony show. You know, totally manipulated by the commentators and the audience that you were talking about just momentarily. But there are a lot of town hall meetings that you can find on the internet that really, where there's one candidate facing an audience of real people, and they're asked questions and they give their positions, and they're much, much, much more informative than these phony debates that are being, projected to us. And I encourage people to search those town hall meetings because they're all over the place.
Yeah, I'm with you. And by the way, right now CNN is reporting that the Defense Secretary and the Secretary of HHS, Alex Azar, are being grilled about the Trump administration taking money away from the CDC's work to combat epidemics and moving it to Trump's wall, which is totally bizarre. But yeah, I agree with you. The debate was problematic, to say the very least. Elle in Seattle. Hey, Elle, we have a little less than a minute. You got a quick question?
I do. In fact, you've thrown such a broad net that I'm going to zero in on just one topic that was really brought to mind by DeSantis. Please, will you explain to our voters, your listeners, how, if they are not participating in the provisional process and they're registered as independent voters, their vote there is a possibility that they can be thrown into a provisional pot and their vote can be discounted.
Well, that would be in a primary, and that's going to depend on the state. You've got closed primary states and open primary states. And in the closed primary states, in order to get a ballot that has Democrats on it, you have to be registered as a Democrat or Republicans. On the other hand, because the Supreme Court ruled in 2000 that there is no constitutional right to vote, any state can take away your vote basically any way they want, under any pretense, the typical one being that you've moved. Can't do that with your gun. They can do it with your vote.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Even here in Oregon, they don't take away your vote here, but they could, but they can't take away your gun. I mean, this is a crazy state of affairs. We'll be back. Okay, the magic phone number is 877-378-8669 if you want to support this program and you want to support Free Speech TV. Any donations given after the first 10 minutes of our show are attributed to this program, and so we really appreciate it if you would call 877-378-8669 and make your gift. The Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker is a $20 premium with a $20 contribution. You know, $20, it's like, that's, at least here in Portland, you know, that's the cost of an inexpensive meal in a restaurant, you know, going out one night, $20. If you please help Free Speech TV. They need, this network needs your help. This network runs on your contribution. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With the $20 gift, you can also get a car magnet to get the vote out. And the car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" Yesterday, I read the wrong side of the screen. I was like, what? A car magnet says, "I'm voting, are you?" And it's great. I mean, this is something we need to get out there, right? With a $50 contribution, you get the Just Effing Vote canvas tote bag. And it's a nice, you know, good, solid canvas tote bag. With a $75 gift, you get a coffee mug. The Thom Hartmann Tag Your It coffee mug, which is kind of cool. I need to get one of those myself so I can wave it in front of the TV screen here. With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, with a $240 gift, hang out. You know, you'll get an invitation. We work out the time so it works for people. We tend to try to do it in relatively small groups, 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the most. And, you know, we get together on Zoom or on Skype or whatever, you know, the engineers work out, and have an off-the-record, not recorded, just, you know, just us conversation. And some of them have been absolutely fascinating, where you can ask anything you want, and I'll tell you my unvarnished thoughts, which I generally do here on TV, but sometimes we can drill a little deeper and have, you know, more in-depth conversation, especially one-on-one. So that's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get the Get Out the Vote pack. That's a set of Free Speech TV host postcards to send to friends and family to encourage them to watch our programs and know about Free Speech TV. You get a car magnet to get out the vote. It says, "I'm voting, are you?" You get the Just Effing Vote tote bag, and you get my new book, The Hidden History of the Republican War on Voting. The word Republican is not in the title. I begged my publisher to put it in there, and they were like, "Well, that would seem too partisan." But it's true. So anyhow, that you get the book. With a $360 gift, which could be $30 a month for a year, you get the entire collection of my hidden history books so far. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. That's with a $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and, you know, hang out in our studio here for the last hour of the show. You can see how Sean and Nate and Lise and Joyce, you know, make all this magic here, and you won't see Nigel and Sue, who are, you know, doing the back end stuff on the web and you know, putting together our newsletter with our our free newsletter. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Every single day, it's got a link to every single story that I've referenced, and it only goes to people who sign up for it. We don't sell the list; it's just ours. But Sue puts that together, and it's great stuff. You won't see Dave, our engineer. There's a bunch of great people working on the program. But our frontline folks are all here every day right here in the studio, and they're looking forward to meeting you. And then I'm looking forward to taking you out to lunch. And, you know, we'll have a nice lunch and a nice conversation. There's a couple restaurants just right around the corner here. So that's with a $1,000 gift. Come to Portland for the meet and greet. And, you know, those are our premiums. The bottom line, though, is this is a critical time for America. We are at a crossroads. We have a man in the White House who may well we need to even stop talking about this in the future, who has already turned our government into an instrument of autocracy. We now have our Justice Department investigating people that Donald Trump views as his enemies, his perceived enemies. The Justice Department actually investigated Hillary Clinton to see if there was any possible reason to put her in jail. This actually happened. They actually investigated the former FBI director, James Comey, and his assistant, Andrew McCabe, to see if there was anything that they did when they were looking into Russian interference in the election that might have been wrong, that they could use to put James Comey and Andrew McCabe in jail. They actually did. They couldn't find anything in either case, but they actually did these investigations. They are purging the Justice Department of lawyers who are impartial and replacing them with Trump toadies. This has happened in the Justice Department, in the Environmental Protection Agency. They moved all the scientists out to St. Louis, Missouri, which stripped them of half their scientists, and they are essentially persecuting the scientists who believe in climate change and hiring scientists who don't believe in climate change and who think pollution is just fine, thank you very much. In the Interior Department, same deal. They've gotten rid of many of the scientists, and they're now selling off our public lands, including some sacred Native American sites. It's insane. We need to talk about it. 877-378-8669. Call now. Coming up in the Science Revolution this week, I explain why biodiversity matters and what happens when we lose biodiversity. Margaret Butler from the Extinction Rebellion is here about the activists fighting against oil trains and what happened to them. Dr. David Reichmuth also joins me on the impact of electric cars, and find out why people are adding mushrooms to their coffee. That's the Science Revolution, wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, picking up your calls. James in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Hey, James, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Question for you. Yourself and many others have said that the Russians interfered with the election 2016, and they're also, interfering with the election now. I've yet heard anybody say what they did to affect the election, and if they are, and we know they are, why can't we stop it?
Well, what we know from the Mueller report, and he indicted, I believe, 17 Russians for doing this, is that they were running a massive social media operation out of, somewhere in the Russian Federation that had thousands, perhaps even millions of phony Facebook and Twitter accounts, and were using them to basically bomb against Hillary Clinton and in favor of Donald Trump. That massive media operation was going on, and also they were promoting disinformation about individual candidates and stuff like that. And according to Seth Abramson, in his book Proof of Conspiracy, it wasn't just the Russians. He said that the Emiratis, people from the United Arab Emirates, were doing this, that the government of the UAE was doing this, that the government of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, were doing the same thing, and that a couple of billionaires, not the government of Israel, but people closely aligned to Bibi Netanyahu, were doing the same thing in Israel. That's Seth Abramson saying that. So what they're doing now, I think it's the same thing. I blocked 3 people on Twitter this morning that I thought were obviously trolls. I don't know if they were Russian trolls or Emirati trolls or Saudi trolls or just, good old-fashioned American trolls, but, enough already. And, that's what we've got to be looking for. And you're going to see them all over Facebook because Mark Zuckerberg has just kind of welcomed this sort of thing. So that's the problem. James, thanks for the call. Ivan in Bartlett, Illinois. Hey, Ivan, what's on your mind?
Hey, thanks, Tom. When the debate moderators gotcha clowns asked Bernie, how are you going to pay for it?
Right.
I wish he would simplify his answer. Instead of trying to go into the weeds, simply say, end socialism for the rich, end corporate welfare, tax the 1% billionaires their fair share, implement a small tax on Wall Street transactions, end the stupid war on drugs, end the racket of war in the Middle East, and lift the cap on Social Security. Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah, and you just laid it out very tightly there, Ivan. It won't fit on a bumper sticker, but you're absolutely right, and I salute you for it. Thanks a lot for the call. Mark in Portland, Oregon, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. Just a quick question. Or statement. I think Bernie should always invoke FDR in his speeches because he is an FDR Democrat.
I agree.
And the more he can say FDR in his responses, people get it. I mean, people know what Social Security is about. They know how good it is. And the other thing I wanted to say is that if there could be a 30-second spot, national spot, that just says, what is democratic socialism? And then have them go blank by blank, real simple, but real easy to understand, and just blanket the national consciousness as what is democratic socialism. I mean, that needs to be out there in front so that he's not going to get attacked by, a Putin puppet. And, that really needs to be out in the forefront of
well, up to this point, the full weight of the Democratic Party and all the various groups associated with it has not been brought to bear to help or hurt any one particular candidate. If Bernie is the party's nominee, and I think right now there's at least a 50-50 chance he will be, which is amazing, given where the party went after Clinton in '92. If Bernie is the nominee, that full force, all that weight of all these other organizations, I don't think they're going to sit the election out. Even if they don't want Bernie's Medicare for all, put him in the White House and then fight it in the legislature. That's what they're going to do, in my opinion. I think that's what they have to do. So let's wait and see. But I agree with you. Bernie needs to say FDR as often as he possibly can. Robert in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Robert, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, good questions prior to mine here. I'm asking, and I think I've seen this before, but it's never made light because Biden and the rest of them, when they're doing these debates, they always come out and say Bernie's never done anything. He's passed, or I should say he's sponsored or co-sponsored over 200 bills in his career that are law now. I don't know why. Right. I don't know why he doesn't say something, or he's not a do-nothing a representative. I don't understand it.
Yeah, one of the things about Bernie is that, he's not an egomaniac, and he has not required, some legislators will require that their name be part of the name of the bill, or that they be listed as the prime sponsor or the lead sponsor. There's even legislation that Bernie has authored where his name is not, and or isn't at the very top of it. Some of the other candidates, they want their, Joe Biden wanted his name on the crime bill. He wanted his name on the bankruptcy bill, and so there they are. But Bernie hasn't done that. But you're absolutely right. He has sponsored or co-sponsored 200 pieces of legislation that have become law, and he's been a very, very, very effective legislator over the years. Thanks, Robert, for that. Kathy in Quincy, Illinois. Hey, Kathy, what's up?
Hey, I heard you say something about the government taking away more Native American land.
Yes, they're doing it right now to build Trump's wall down on the southern border. They're tearing up, some absolute sacred sites and burial sites. Yes, as we speak.
Oh my God! Like them people haven't given up enough. I mean, I get tired of people bitching. About immigrants coming in. I thought, what do you think we are?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you want to talk about immigrants? Talk to a Native American about the immigrants here in America.
We were nice to them. We took everything they had.
Yeah, I'm with you. And not only is Trump down there busting up Native American sacred places and really significant sites. Historically significant sites. But he's doing it with money that he took from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. He took money from the CDC's response to epidemic programs and diverted it into building his damn wall down in Mexico, at least according to some of these reports that I'm seeing. Lisa in Montreal, Canada. Hey, Lisa, thanks for watching us in Canada on YouTube. What's up?
I caught a bit of your show yesterday, and and thanks for taking my call, by the way.
Sure.
I caught a bit of your show yesterday, and I remember you saying about I saw the Obama speech in Cuba and I remember that, and I thought, okay, the debate's on, but I missed the beginning of it, and I got in when they asked Bernie that exact question, and nobody mentioned anything about Obama had said the same thing. And
Bernie tried to say that, but he was talked over. Forgive me for talking over you, but Bernie tried to say that.
And the audience was so bizarre. Like, they were booing, and I thought, that is the weirdest audience that you could. It just didn't make any sense.
Right.
And come to find out that, as you said today, that there's, it was rigged.
Yeah.
It was completely rigged.
Yeah, you had to pay $1,700 to be in the audience, minimum.
Well, that's crazy. But so like, I'm wondering, are American voters aware of this? Are they, up to speed on how the establishment is just completely bulldozing them?
They're not.
Really crazy.
This should have been disclosed by the moderators last night. They should have said, and our audience tonight is comprised of people who are able to afford $1,700 for seats in the back of the room and $3,200 for seats up in the front where they can be heard, when they clap or boo. This is who our audience is.
But come to find out that, I caught little bits and pieces of even CNN, MSNBC during the evening yesterday, and not a mention of anything that Obama had ever said. Not a mention.
Yep.
I mean, it's
outrageous. So Lisa, you're a Canadian.
Outrageous.
I mean, you said a boot rather than a bout. I'm guessing you're a Canadian citizen?
Yes, I am.
So you're not voting in this election, but what are your thoughts about the impact of, a second Trump term or even a Sanders term or another Democrat, on you as a Canadian citizen and on Canada as a country?
That's a very good question. I would think that I know here, most of the people that I know and that I speak to, because we're pretty hip to what's going on around, and we're really rooting for Bernie. Trump, really, there's not very many Canadians that have a great opinion of Trump, unfortunately. But, Americans are our neighbors. We are always welcome here. We are, we're like sort of like kissing cousins, as they say. Mm-hmm. But we're rooting for Bernie. We really are.
So, because, Lisa, in Canada, my understanding is that everybody has health care, that if you can afford to pay, if your income is over a certain level, it might cost you $100 or $200 a month to have your Medicare for all policy, but basically everybody has health care.
But we also have private health insurance also, too.
Sure. And
everybody has to be insured.
Yeah, but I think we will here in the United States, too. And also, I understand that in Canada, people who are not wealthy can send their kids to public colleges for pretty much nothing. Is that the case?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
I went through the...
Go ahead.
No, I said I went through the public college system, university system. I graduated, yes.
Yeah.
And
without debt.
I think, absolutely without debt. I mean, my children, my eldest just finished university, and I would say he came out with about $5,000 in debt, which he's paying off in student loans, which he's paying off slowly.
Right.
But the majority, the bulk of it is paid by the government, and then as a parent, I contributed, and he worked part-time to contribute also. So he came out with about $5,000 in debt. But that was for housing because he went to school out of province.
Right. So in another state, or out of what we would call out of state here. So Lisa, my question, as a Canadian citizen and a keen observer of American politics, and you're knowledgeable about Bernie's policies, Bernie's being portrayed as a wild-eyed radical. Is there anything that Bernie is suggesting that isn't basically already being done in Canada and works well?
No. No, but we've had that all the time, so I don't know anything else. I don't know. Yeah. I cannot even begin to imagine, being a U.S. citizen now at this time. No. Sure, our taxes are a bit higher. We're a little bit more bureaucratic, sure. But, I don't have that. I cannot begin to imagine thinking about having to pay for medical expenses and student debt. I don't know that. So I can't relate. It's very, very difficult for me to relate, Right. And it's only now that I realize how I always thought of America as like, that beacon on the hill, as they say, but I'm thinking, wow, I don't know if it's all of that.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I think increasingly Canada's the beacon on the hill, It's just an amazing time.
And I used to, we always put Canada second to none, or second best, I should say.
Yeah.
But I think we're doing all right.
I think you are, too, and so is Mr. Trudeau. Lisa, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you there in Montreal in Canada. I very much appreciate the call, and thank you. We'll be right back with more of your calls and more of the news of the day here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's 47 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the home of the political revolution, your media support group for We the People, the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. Jim in Valley Center, California. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to comment on the Bernie Sanders line about Fidel Castro. My take is Obama said it when he was president. Bernie is saying it when he wants to be president. My point is Bernie should say, first of all, Fidel Castro was a dictator, a tyrant.
He did say that on 60 Minutes, emphatically.
Yes, but he didn't say it strong enough, Tom. And I was with a bunch of people last night, and they naturally, pick up on that. Half of them are Republicans, and they're not going to vote for Bernie no matter what. But the point being is that Bernie, I think, needs to disavow any friendship with Castro or his regime, and he's got to come out as forceful as he does as Medicare for all and that, because they're going to hang. Trump's going to play that over and over and over again, and he has to really be ready to fight that.
Well, I don't disagree that he's going to have to fight it, but I also think that the vast majority of Democrats, if Bernie is the nominee, are going to look at this and say, okay, so Bernie said the exact same thing Obama said, so what? I'm still going to vote for him. I don't think that that's going to cost him many Democratic votes outside of possibly a small part of the Cuban population in Florida. And frankly, that would be the Cubans who are my age, the ones who actually escaped from Cuba, or even older than me. The younger Cubans, the second and third generation Cubans, they're solidly progressive now in southern Florida, whereas their fathers and grandfathers and mothers and grandmothers were solidly conservative and Republican. That's the change. That's why Marco Rubio has just lost his mojo. I mean, he was the guy who represented the former rich Cubans, the Batista Cubans, and they're just dying off. They're dropping like flies.
The codicil to that, and I don't disagree with what you just said, but the codicil to that is if I'm on the fence as a voter, I don't want that thrown into the voter's mindset. I just would.
But here's the thing, Jim. When Obama opened the United States to Cuba and vice versa, when Obama legalized movement to Cuba, I don't know if you recall, but I believe it was like about 3 years out of the end of his presidency. So it would have been around 2013, 2014. And then he made a trip to Cuba and he met with them and said, here's the good things you're doing. Here's the bad things you're doing. Let's try. And the trade will help. There was a lot of polling that was done on that. And what they found was that Republicans overwhelmingly supported what Obama was doing, not just Democrats. So I think that if Bernie comes along and says, we don't like, dictators, but let's open up our relationships like Obama tried to do with Cuba, I don't think he's going to lose Republican votes, those who might be inclined, people in the middle, people on the fence. I don't think he's going to lose those votes. Obama didn't lose those votes.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that part. I think that he's already labeled with the socialist thing that is obviously not true, as we all know. He's Democratic socialist. But we don't want to give the opponent the ammunition to use against us. That's just my point.
Well, it's already out there. You can't stop it. And that's and that's why I think that, we just need to point out there was a time in the United States for about 3 years where we had a good relationship with Cuba. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans visited Cuba and, can talk about this from personal experience. And it was a good thing for us and it was a good thing for Cuba, and we should go back to that. And Trump blew that up just as a gratuitous, toss to the hard right Cubans in Florida by and large. And like I said, they're dying off. Jim, thanks for the call. I get your concern, and we're all concerned. We don't want to see another 4 years of Trump. It would be a disaster for this country. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Tom in Stuart, Florida. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Well, you mentioned Hitler's creation of the Autobahn system, and I'm thinking when people are attacking Bernie for defending good things that Castro did, he should mention that Eisenhower adopted the Autobahn idea to create our interstate system.
You're right.
So a good idea is a good idea, right?
You're right. Yeah, there you go. Excellent point. Tom, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Hey, Tom. The thing we need to be battering these guys on is the economy. You know, it's a poor economy. It's in the gutter. The truest thing Ronald Reagan ever said was when he said it's about the economy, stupid. And
actually, that was Bill Clinton. That was the guy who ran the Bill Clinton campaign. I'm forgetting his name, but they had a sign that they hung in their main campaign office that said, "It's the economy, stupid." And that was the Clinton mantra. But anyway, back to you.
Thank you for the correction. But what his opponent said, his later vice president, Bush the Elder,
right, that
his proposals, his economic proposals were going to be voodoo economics, and that's exactly what we have after 40 years. America's a zombie. It's a hollowed-out zombie of what it was 40 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. And using that voodoo economics phrase from George Herbert Walker Bush to describe where we're at right now and using your zombie metaphor is brilliant. James, thank you for that. I think that's a good one. Joe in Fowlerville, Michigan. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
I've noticed that, I haven't saw on any show or anything about our salute is supposed to change when we run from a fight. When we ran out of Vietnam like we did and left all our allies to get killed and everything, and, to happen whatever happens to them.
And Trump just did that to the Kurds in Syria.
Yes, we did. And because we did that, our salute had to change. We changed our salute in 74. And when it got changed back, I don't know, I come out before it changed. But they made it go to 1:30 instead of 3 o'clock when you salute somebody. And I heard no one talk about that. But it's a military law, we were told back then. People actually had to serve 2 weeks detail duty for not doing it on our base and that.
That's interesting.
I was one of them. Over 100 people did it. And at first, they started doing Article 15s, but then they realized there was too many people that it was happening to, so they went to details.
So they changed the salute from 3 o'clock to 1:30.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, they give you a window. I think it was like 2:30 to 1:30, but you had to expose your palm.
Right.
But you're not all the way up. You couldn't go to 12 noon or 8.
I get it. But why did this happen, Joe?
It was because we ran from a fight.
Seriously, in 74, the military said that was the reason?
Yep, they changed the salute and everything. I was one of the ones that
That's amazing. I've been wondering why the Republican Party in 2000 flipped their stars upside down and went from the American star, the 5-pointed star with the top point at the top, looking like a human, like Leonardo da Vinci's man, with the 5 points, flipped it upside down so that now on the top you got the 2 goat horns, on the sides you got the 2 goat ears, and on the bottom you got the chinny chin chin. That's the satanic star. That's a pentagram rather than or a pentangle, I guess it's called, rather than a star. And no Republican has been able to explain to me why the Republican Party officially in the year 2000 changed the stars on their logo, and you can just see this anywhere, changed the stars on their logo from the American star that is on our flag to the satanic star that the Church of Satan uses. And
I wasn't aware. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know about the salute. You didn't know about the stars. Look up the stars. I'll look up the salute. I find this stuff fascinating.
I know. I'd like to see someone address it, especially with Biden coming after Sanders like he is when he voted for the war and everything. And you think it cost over 1 million lives of Iraqis and over 40,000 paraplegics, and it goes on and on. I know you're aware about most of that stuff and that.
Yeah, no, we've paid a terrible price for George Bush lying us into 2 wars, 2 unnecessary wars. In Afghanistan,
I'll never vote Republican.
Right. In Afghanistan, Mullah Omar came right out, the leader of the Taliban, the leader of Afghanistan, and said, if you've got any evidence that bin Laden did this, and of course we had the evidence, provide it to the world and I will arrest him. And George W. Bush said, no, we'd rather have a war. And then that wasn't enough of a war. He had to lie us into the war in Iraq because Dick Cheney had already pre-sold the oil in Iraq. And it's obscene. And to this day, Americans are dying and being wounded and being injured as a consequence of those Republican lies. Joe, thank you for the call. And thanks for the information. We'll be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. In the meantime, don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires action. That is you. Get involved. Make sure your voter registration is solid. Tell your friends how to find progressive media. And get out there and get active. Tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.